Y'all don't listen. Y'all don't look so excited, okay? This is not a funeral. It's just class. All right? My goodness. You would have thought that this is an open county and y'all were just coming to pay your respects, right? It's not going to be that bad. I mean, it is, but it's not. I'm going to try to make it a little less torturous than that. So, let's do the darn thing, folks. Welcome back, as I said already. Let me just give you a little bit of a recap as to what we talked about yesterday. Yesterday was, of course, your introduction. It was, hey, welcome to class. Hey, this is what you just embarked on. Hey, this is what to expect. And then it was a little bit of, here's how the application process is going to work. Now, real quick reminders just for class etiquette. Quiet, stationary environment conducive to learning. Have to see your bright, shiny, smiley faces on screen. If you have to step away, make sure you put that BRB in the chat. No doing any nonsensical things or I will remove you from the meeting. Of course, every meeting gone counts against your time. So hopefully we're all on the same page for that. Don't make me have to monitor the screens to the umpteenth degree because I'd rather focus on teaching you what you need to know. But when we get into the actual licensing process, remember, this class is what you would consider your education requirement. So you've got to get through this class with a requisite attendance. Then you got to pass my class test, and that gets you your education to go on and apply for a license in the state of North Carolina. One of the other pieces that's going to be required of you is, of course, a background check, which we talked about a little bit yesterday. The link to that is in that Relink book that we were looking through. I told you my recommendation is to take that around, when there's 3-ish weeks left of the class, as long as you feel very confident that you put in the time and the effort to pass, because those background checks are only good for 6 months. And so once you get all of that back, then you can apply for your license. And what you'll really get when you apply is the ability to take the actual state licensing exam. It's called Exam Eligibility Notice from the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. And then that will allow you to go on and take the state licensing exam, which is separate than the class one. Also bifurcated, which means 2 parts. Have to pass that one. And then you will get your license issued. Of course, we have materials available to you, and always feel free to ask questions at any point in regard to the licensing process. What you got, Constantine?
So that actually did spark a question for me, because I remember going over this yesterday for the background check. You said the 6 months period. Does that only apply for getting your provisional license, or would that go through the same process if I were to, say, try and get my full, if I wanted to become a full broker?
Excellent question. There is no secondary licensing process. And so once you go through the background check, the application, and you get your license, as long as you, and we're going to talk about what it takes to keep that license, but as long as you pay your dues and meet your education requirements every year, you always have a license. And so it's actually automatic. Once you complete your post-licensing courses, you move from provisional broker to full broker. No secondary application, no paperwork, no nothing. Excellent question. Yep, for sure. So when you jump through all those hoops, folks, that will ultimately end you up with a license, a broker's license, as I've been saying, in the fine, fine state of North Kakalaki. However, your license is issued on provisional and inactive status. Now, I mentioned those things a teeny tiny bit yesterday, and that's where we're going to segue into actual material. So I just wanted to recap kind of the licensing process and things to be aware of. So let's move forward here. And it's talking about all the same stuff. So let's start here, folks. I told you, or better yet, you told me that there were certain things that you don't need a license for. And some of you had some interesting epiphanies, but here's the thing. There's a reason you signed up for this class, and while you may not necessarily need it for exactly what you thought you needed it before, for exactly what you needed this license for, it's still a good starting point for anything real estate related. You have to understand there is the legal, logistical testing point of view of when a license is required and when it's not. And then there is also a practical point of view of what doors can open for you with having a license and what benefits can come to you from having a license. So here is a very, very, very important and very, very, very testable thing to start committing to memory, okay? Some of the biggest things that you're going to be tested on the North Carolina portion of the exam are if you need a license. And then further than that, what status your license may be on, what you can and can't do with the status being on a certain level. And so, understand that if we're asking you a question on a provisional broker, that's going to be a very different answer than if we're asking you a question about a full broker. And so here's where we're going to start, okay? I told you yesterday the criteria for when a license is required in North Carolina, and I also told you that you were going to see it on a slide and to not panic. And so the acronym to remember, what we call brokerage activities, is LLBs. And so here's the words that are associated with that right here. Anytime that somebody does any of these brokerage activities, which would include list, lease, buy, exchange, auction, negotiate, sell. So if you offered to do those things, if you do in fact do those things, or if you refer somebody to do those things, those are considered brokerage activities. Now, the other piece of this is real property for others for compensation. Folks, you need to burn that statement into your brains right now, okay? Real property for others for compensation. I want you to look at this picture, how they're all pieced together. If you don't have all three, you do not need a license in North Carolina. No ifs, ands, buts, or coconuts. You don't. If all three exist, then you absolutely would need a license if it's involving real property for others for compensation and these LLBs activities. And so let me play into this a little bit, as we said yesterday. If you were selling your own house and you, of course, made money from it, you don't need a license. It is real property. You are making money. It's not for others. No license needed. If you are managing your best friend's beach house because y'all are cool, real property for your best friend, not getting paid, no license needed. Now, there are zero exceptions for what if it's only a little bit of money. There are zero exceptions for what if it's a family member. There's zero exceptions for what if it's only one deal a year. If these three things exist, look at me, no ifs, ands, buts, or coconuts, like I said, you need a license. And that's exactly how you have to look at this on the test. Because they will give you situations where you are managing your, grandmother's property, in exchange for use of her car. Folks, use of a car is something of value. Does this make sense for everybody? Another way to think of it, aside from this diagram of three different, things going in, I want you to think of a stool that has three legs, folks, a tripod. If you take one of them away, what's going to happen to the stool if it's missing one leg and it's a three-legged stool?
It'll fall.
It'll fall. I appreciate that. Folks, if it can't stand up as a stool, then it's not a license required scenario. Now, please understand that this also includes referrals. So let me help you piece this together a little bit more, folks. If any of you were to call me after class tonight and you say, hey, Seth, my brother is moving back to North Carolina and I want you to help him buy a house. Well, folks, I can do that. Why?
You're licensed.
I'm licensed, and so I can get paid for doing that. Now, if you then go and look at me and you say, well, since you're going to be making some money from me sending my brother to you, why don't you send me a little something, something on the side to sweeten the deal for me? Well, folks, you referred somebody to buy real property. So there's that buy, real property. It's not you buying it and you're expecting money. That's a legal brokerage activity. Folks, if you wanted to get that legally, that would require a license. Now, let me ask you something. Do you think that there are agents out there who are sending something of value, something compensatory to their past clients for sending them referrals? Like, what you got, Rob? Yeah, you think so?
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely, right? Folks, can we agree that wine is something of value? Gift cards are something of value? Money is something of value? It's happening all the time. If you send me a referral and I send you a gift card, say, hey, thanks for being a good referral partner. I just broke the law, folks. Because while I can legally accept compensation, paying you an unlicensed person a referral fee would be illegal. And this is where I told you yesterday, do not think about what happens, right? Because some of you are like, oh man, I sent my mom to my agent and they sent me a case of wine. Probably illegal, technically speaking. Do not think about your personal experiences. Don't think about what's happening out there in the real world. Let me make a very powerful point, folks. If any of you were in your car earlier today, driving to or from your job or to the grocery store to pick up the kids, to whatever you may have been doing, if you went anywhere today, any day, you passed something called a speed limit sign. Here's my question for you folks. Have any of you ever driven faster than the number that's printed on that sign? Don't you lie to me. You better, every single one of you, shake your head. Some of y'all lying. Like, I plead the fifth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not telling you nothing. Folks, if you have ever gone faster than the speed limit, you have broken the law. You are a criminal. You're a heathen. I'm ashamed of you. People break the law all the time. But you're not answering questions on the test on what people do. You're answering questions on the test on what is the law? What is the rule? When would this be legal? When would this be illegal? Is this making sense for everybody? So when I tell you something, it's got to be set in stone. Now here's the crazy thing. There are defaults for everything. This is the default for this topic. But the crazy thing about real estate is there are very few absolutes. Okay? Very few absolutes. So you'll see that there's exceptions. Doesn't mean that there's no absolutes, but it just means if you see something that's an absolute on the test, you better look at it long and hard before you say, yeah, that's the answer. So let's take this a step further, okay? LL Beans, list, lease, buy, exchange, auction, negotiate, sell, doing those things, referring to do those things, offering to do those things, and it deals with real property for others for compensation. A license is required. As I've already stated multiple times, if one of those pieces is missing, just one, you don't need a license. If it's not real property, folks, you could help your buddy sell their car tomorrow and they could pay you to do it. Nobody cares. You know why? It's not real estate. There are car laws, right? But that's not what we're worried about in this class. It would be completely legal for you to get paid for helping somebody sell their bike, their car, their whatever. But this is a real estate class, and as such, there are real estate laws that dictate how we operate. So if it's missing one of these, license isn't required under most circumstances. So as we've been saying, if you're doing it for yourself, you don't need a license. I'm buying property for myself. You don't need a license. I'm selling my own property. I don't need a license. I'm managing my own property. I don't need a license. If I'm doing what would constitute brokerage activities for somebody else, and it is real property, but I'm not making any money, as weird as it sounds, you don't need a license. We can all agree it's kind of a stupid thing to do. Why would you hire your friend who doesn't have a license to assist you in selling your house, and why would they do it for free? But don't focus on that. Because if it happens that way, no license was needed. Everybody still with me? As soon as you are doing real property for others for compensation, in order to be legally paid, a license is required. Otherwise, you just got paid for illegal brokerage activity. Folks, that is a misdemeanor. It's criminal law that you have violated if you do brokerage activity or any of these paid fees illegally without a license. So make sure you're tracking with me here, folks. We got Steve knows his brother is interested in purchasing a new home, and sends him to an active real estate broker who will represent his brother in the purchase. Upon closing, the broker sends Steve a $100 Visa gift card. Would this be okay?
No. 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 No, 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 no.
No. Absolutely not, right? It is referring somebody, real property, okay, to buy a house, real property, somebody other than themselves, and expecting payment. Now, the agent can help this person. The agent can get paid, but by sending this referral fee to an unlicensed person, that is illegal brokerage activity. That's a no-go. How about this one? If my clicker wants to work. It might help if I plugged it in. Susan manages a house she owns and books all the tenants and negotiates the rent amounts She saves a lot of money managing it herself. Is this acceptable, or does she need a license to do this?
She doesn't need a license because it's her house. She owns it, right?
Yeah. Everybody good with that? It's her house. She is managing it. It is real property. She is managing it, doing leases, okay? So she's making money, saving money, but it's not for anybody else. No problem here. So when we're dealing with this, folks, there is an entire section or an entire testable section based on North Carolina license laws and commission rules. Now you have access to that link in the online program, but let me show you what this kind of looks like and give you some insight here. I introduced you to the North Carolina Real Estate Commission website yesterday. And so there's a place to find a lot of these important documents on here. And so this one, as I'm talking about, is called the License, Law, and Commission Rulebook. Not to be confused with the manual we looked at yesterday called the RELINK, which is basically the guide to apply for a license. This one is a law and rulebook, as the name sounds. So if you go under Publications, Commission Information, License, Law, and Commission Rules, and as I said, it is linked in your materials. Folks, let me tell you something, okay? As this pulls up, it's about 123 pages. And so I want to kind of show you how this thing functions. I'm not teaching you everything in here yet, but I want you to know that this is a very important resource. So it is called the License, Law, and Commission Rules. There are two separate categories. License laws as drafted by the North Carolina General Assembly, and commission rules as given the powers for the commission to create and enforce as outlined by the North Carolina General Assembly. And so there are three sections in this book. There is the license laws, there is the commission rules separated out, and then there is the comment section. Let me explain what the comment section is. If you were to read this book, folks, from cover to cover, you ready for this? You would go find the closest, nearest highway, and you would lay in the middle of it and just wait. Like, that's what you would do. It's horrible. It's terrible. It's no good. It's very bad. A bunch of old geezers with law degrees wrote this to be as convoluted and confusing as possible. I promise they did. Do not read this cover to cover. You will hate your life. But you'll see that in the syllabus, there are some very particular laws and rules that are discussed. Those are the ones that are testable. Now, the comment section is where they take these laws and rules and they basically try to put them in layman speak, meaning jargon that you and I can understand, and then give you comments on them and examples to help you understand them. So let me show you what I mean, folks, just to really make this come full circle. What did I just teach you was the criteria for needing a license? Somebody help me out.
Real property for compensation.
There you go. Let's combine those two. LL Beans, real property for others for compensation. That's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Mm-hmm. You kind of got a good grasp on that now, don't you? Let me show you what it looks like in this law and rule book. You ready for this? When we get into the law and rule book, let me zoom in so you can actually see how crazy this is. You want to see what it actually says in this law and rule book? A real estate broker, within the meaning of this chapter, is any person, partnership, corporation, limited liability company, association, or other business entity who, for compensation or valuable consideration or promise thereof, lists or offers to list, sells or offers to sell, buys or offers to buy, auctions or offers to auction, specifically not including a mere cry of sales, or negotiates the purchase or sale or exchange of real estate, or who leases or offers to lease, or who sells or offers to sell leases of whatever character, or rents or offers to rent any real estate or the improvement thereon for others. Do you see what I mean? Imagine that everything I taught you, I talked like that, right? Isn't that so much similar to say LL Beans, real property for others for compensation? Because that's what I just taught you. So if you read this line by line, you're going to want to jump off of a cliff. But you do need to look in this book because there are some laws and rules that are extremely testable. And so just to show you as we get into this next piece, what I'm about to teach you is, well, exceptions, okay? Because what I just told you, that's the general rule of thumb for when a license is required. But I told you there's no absolutes. there are some exceptions. And so if you come down, the provisions do not apply to and do not include. And so if you're looking at this book, it goes down to the bottom left and then it comes back to the top right column. So this is where it starts naming very specific exceptions. Number 1, and then subcategories of number 1, and then number 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And so I'm just going to talk about these, but I just want to show you kind of how this navigates. So let me take it back to the slides just so you kind of know where this is coming from. So number 1, which is that big paragraph as an exception, and then all the subcategories. Let's see if you can follow along with me here. Number 1 said W-2 salaried employees who are employed by an entity owner of the real estate. Well, folks, let me ask you a question. Have you ever heard of Microsoft? You ever heard of them? Yeah, they're a company, right? You've heard of Microsoft. What are they in the business of? What kind of company is Microsoft?
IT, computer.
IT, computer, program. Yeah, absolutely. They're a tech company. Let's call them a tech company. Now, here's the thing. Microsoft, the tech company, do you think that as a corporation, as an entity, as a business, do you think they probably own some real estate? Sure they do. Vincenzo says absolutely. He's like, yeah, they do. Absolutely. Yeah, they do. So they definitely own some real estate. They probably have some big corporate buildings. They probably have some private houses. They probably have a lot of investments. And so I just told you that an owner can sell their own house without a license, right? You can do that. You agree? Okay. So Microsoft owns real estate, and so it would make sense that Microsoft can sell their own real estate without a license. You agree? Here's my question. Who is Microsoft?
Entity, yes.
It is an entity.
Corporation. Or corporation, business.
Right.
A makeup of a bunch of different people that makes Microsoft.
Yeah, a makeup of a bunch of different people that makes up Microsoft. Absolutely, Leighton. Those are all correct statements. So, folks, here's my question to you. If Microsoft can legally sell its own property, and you can't name one person that is Microsoft, because there's a lot of people that make up Microsoft, this is where exception number 1 comes into play. Entities are not one person. They're multiple. So what exemption number 1 says is, well, anybody who is an actual salaried employee, W-2, manager, owner, otherwise, could sell the entity's property without a license. So let me paint a picture for you, folks. There is nothing stopping the CEO of Microsoft from walking into their employee cafeteria, looking at the dishwasher and say, hey, Steve, stop washing dishes. Go put a sign in the yard of 123 Main Street and sell it. He could do it. Why? Because Steve is not just Steve. Steve is part of Microsoft. Does that make sense? It's, yeah. So entity owners can sell their own real estate, but since entities are not people, folks, do not let this confuse you though, because I would never refer to somebody else as me. So there's a huge disparity, a huge difference on the test. You all agree that even if I didn't have a license, that I could manage my own property without a license, yes? Okay. The second I tried to hire a secondary person to assist me in managing my properties, what have I just done?
Require them to have a license?
Require them to have a license, because there is nobody else that is an extension of me. So an individual owner hiring somebody else would be a problem, because now you've hired someone to do brokerage activities without a license. But if you are an entity owner and you have property, real estate to sell, any employee, manager, part owner, anybody can be appointed to sell it. And it basically falls under the same exemption of not for others. Let me give you a real world example of this, folks. I was teaching this. We teach this a lot more in depth in your post-licensing classes. And I was teaching this to a student in post-licensing on a greater detailed level. And she stops and she looks at me. She says, well, Seth, did I even need a license? And I said, well, I don't know, girl. What you mean? And she said, well, here's the reason I got a license. My sister owns rental properties that she uses as short-term rentals, and I'm going to be managing them for her. So did I even need a license? Now, let me go ahead and introduce the best answer to every real estate question that you could ever ask me. You ready for this? Adult diapers. Adult diapers. You know the brand name of adult diapers is?
Depends. Depends?
Depends.
I'm done.
The best answer to every real estate question is depends. So here's what I asked her. I said it depends on whether or not certain criteria have been met. And she says, what do you mean? I said, does your sister own these properties in the name of your sister, or does she own them in the name of an entity? Do you see the difference? Because let's say her sister's name was Susan. If Susan hired this sister, we'll just call her Beth, okay? That is hiring somebody other than yourself to do brokerage activity and paying them to do it. Real property for others for compensation, absolutely should have needed a license. But if Susan started a company called Susan's Investments LLC, and then Susan's Investments LLC was the legal deeded owner of that property, and then that company hired her as an employee, she doesn't need a license. You see how that works? You've got to be very careful on the licensing exam, because if you're answering about an individual person, anybody else helping and getting paid, that's a problem. But if it's an entity owning real property, it's okay. Let me take this one step further. Folks, any of you ever looked at new construction properties in the fine, fine state of North Carolina? Sure you have. Pretty houses, right? We all like pretty houses. That's the reason some of you are getting your licenses, right? I like pretty houses. Just wait, you'll get tired of them. Here's the thing. When we're dealing with builders, this happens quite a bit. Folks, the builders buy the dirt. The builders buy the wood. They hire contractors. They own all of it. So now you've got a company, an entity, which is the building company, who owns this house that's brand new. There is nothing stopping them from hiring employees to sell their properties, because now that employee is an extension of ABC Builders. But there are two options. Not all builders do that. The reason why some builders don't do that, I think some of you even mentioned yesterday that you work for a builder, maybe a property management company. But if you work for a builder and you can't sell houses, it's because your builder has elected to not go that route, because it's all or nothing, folks. You have to be W-2. They have to provide insurance. They have to pay your taxes. You have to be W-2. They cannot pay you on a transactional basis. But if you are a broker, they can hire you as a broker, pay you at 1099 on a transactional basis. You're not an employee. So both are legally acceptable from a builder point of view. So be very careful on a test. Can ABC Builders hire an employee to sell their houses? Sure. Guess what's going to happen, folks? And this is where people get confused, okay? Before I connect this to the builder, I want you to think if you were attempting to sell your house on your own as a for sale by owner. Are you going to get phone calls from potential buyers? Yes. Are you going to show your home to potential buyers? Yes. Are you going to negotiate a sales price with potential buyers? Yes. You're going to do all those things as an individual property owner. Now understand that if you are an employee of a builder, you're also going to do all those things, and it's still okay, because you're basically an extension of the owner. An on-site builder employee is going to show these properties for sale to a buyer. They are going to negotiate with the buyer. They are going to draft up contracts. Now, that doesn't mean they work for them. That's another big thing to understand, and we'll talk more about that in the agency section. Just because you're assisting somebody does not mean you work for somebody. Because who do we know they work for in this scenario? The builder, right? Let me give you a really powerful example of kind of the way that works. And I'm going to use this same example, so it's going to sound like I'm old and I forget things, which I do. But I'll use this example again when we get to agency. Folks, have you ever walked into Best Buy? Sure. But listen, most of us have. Some of you are like, Best what? Never heard of it. Folks, what happens if you walk into Best Buy?
Yeah, you're gonna get greeted to by someone in customer service.
There you go. They're going to say, hey, is there anything I can help you find today, right? What are they trying to do? They're trying to sell you something. They're trying to sell you something. Who do they work for? Best Buy. See how this works? Just because somebody's assisting you, just because somebody's talking to you, doesn't mean they work for you. And so that's a very important thing to remember when we get into agency as well. Because the person who works on site at a building community, they work for the seller. They may be very smiley and happy and nice when they really just want your money. So entity owners are a big exemption, okay? Any employee, owner, salaried, anything that is on the books can assist in selling, leasing, whatever, no restrictions. They can do everything that a normal owner can do because they're the extension of the entity owner. This one's very testable. Does that make sense? Don't confuse it with owner, right? Individual owner, very different story. Yes, you can do it for yourself, but you can't bring a second person in. But entity owner, any employee, we're good. So that makes sense for everybody. Now, most of the other ones are a little more straightforward. This next one is talking about a salaried employee who is employed by a broker property manager. Well, folks, you can hire somebody to manage your property that has a license. That's the whole point of having a license. Now they can help you manage your property and you can pay them to do it. So as an individual owner, if you do not want to manage it yourself, you would hire a licensed person. Now, exemption 2 is really talking about, though, is basically this licensed person you hire can also have employees themselves that are unlicensed, and this is not a full-fledged exemption. They are not allowed to do everything and anything, but there is a very limited capacity in which they can do stuff. And so I'll tell you what they can do, and then I'll kind of make this come full circle too. They can show properties that their boss is managing. Okay, so they can't show properties for sale. They can't hold open houses. They can't negotiate, but they can show properties that their boss is managing. And so they could also collect rents and security deposits and take them to their boss. They could answer basic tenant questions, things of that nature. So now that you understand these two exemptions, folks, most of you in here, much like Best Buy, have probably, whether it be yesterday or 20 years ago, most of us have walked into an apartment complex at some point in our lives and talked to the on-site leasing agent. Can we agree that that's a pretty familiar thing that most of us has probably encountered at some point? Well, now that you understand these two exemptions, understand that 99% of the time, the person you are talking to when you are going to a leasing office is one of these two things. They are either an employee of a company that owns the properties, and they employ their own leasing agents, which means they can do everything and anything that an owner can do, like negotiate. Or they are an employee of a broker property manager, which means there is a broker who was hired somewhere in the hierarchy of this apartment complex to manage these units. And they have employed unlicensed persons to sit in the leasing offices. And so you're probably not talking to the actual broker property manager, but because of this exemption, that's why they can say, come on, let's get on the golf cart. I'll take you to see 203B. And then they're asking about your day and they go over the speed bumps. Sorry about that, right? That's why they can do this. Because of these exemptions, one of these two. Is this making sense? Now, of course, there are plenty of instances where neither of these are present and people are just doing things blatantly illegally, right? Happens all the time. But don't answer the question based on that because, yeah, that'd be illegal at that point. Now, the other ones are a little more straightforward, as I mentioned. Okay, attorneys and trustees. Let's just group some multiple categories here together, folks. Attorneys are an exemption, and what I mean is attorneys doing the regular practice of law. So we use attorneys to handle our settlements. They do title searches. They do a lot of things in North Carolina as part of the real estate transaction. They do not need a broker's license to do that because what they're doing is all within the scope of their license as an attorney. Now, if an attorney wanted to go and put a sign in the yard and try to sell somebody's house, they would need a broker's license just like the rest of the world. So it's not a full exemption once again. The other one that really gets grouped in here is any court-appointed authority. So if you are a trustee, an executor, a guardian, and any of these court-appointed positions of authority. Let me give you an example here. Everybody in here know who Britney Spears is? Okay, just making sure. Hey, y'all remember back when everybody was like, hashtag free Britney, let Britney go, right? Because she was in her conservatorship. First and foremost, I want to say I think that was a bad idea. Have you seen Homegirl's Instagram post? She's nuttier than a squirrel turd, all right? But I digress. Here's the point I'm trying to make. When Britney was in her conservatorship, she was not allowed to make any of her decisions on her own. Her father, I believe his name was Jamie, was the guardian of her conservatorship. And so because that was a court-appointed position, he had full control over all of her assets, real estate, finances, everything. Well, he gets paid to do that. You're not required to do that for free. And so he would collect money from her estate to do that. So there he is getting paid. And so if Britney wanted to sell a property, it would have actually been her father who is handling the sale. So there he would be helping her sell real property that was not his and getting paid for it. And this is where I told you there's not a lot of absolutes. There's exceptions to everything. So even though it's seemingly all three are triggered, because he's doing it under a court-appointed authority as a guardian of a conservatorship, he does not need a license. Does that make sense? Same thing too, if you wanted to give, your significant other a power of attorney, to act as an attorney in fact, they don't need a license. Very common time that happens is military spouses. If your spouse is deployed overseas and you have a full power of attorney so you can buy real estate, well, you may end up selling it too. And even though you're doing it on behalf of somebody else, you don't need a license for that. It's because of the court-appointed authority. So all of these court-appointed, no license needed, even though seemingly at face value, real property for others for compensation exists. Everybody still tracking with me here? So when we're dealing with the salaried employee of a broker property manager, please understand that while it is a limited exemption, it is also very important that you realize they can only be paid on an hourly or salary level. They're not allowed to be paid on a per transaction basis, because if you pay them like for lease volume or transactional volume, that's paying them like a real estate broker. Okay, that's not allowed. So just keep that in mind. For the employee of an entity owner, there's really nothing stopping anybody, because it's just like owning it yourself. Who's going to tell you not to pay the entity employee any bonuses or otherwise? So let's keep that in mind. I don't like that one. I already talked about that. This is just reiterating that salaried employee of a broker property manager, the limited things they can do, showing rental properties that their boss manages, setting appointments, collecting rent monies, things of that nature. Now, folks, one other conversation comes into play, and I just want to provide some clarity here. When we're dealing with unlicensed assistants, because that'll sometimes come into play in this class as well. What we're talking about with a broker property manager is somebody's managing the properties and they have an employee. Well, those of us who do sales sometimes hire employees to act as assistants. They are limited to only clerical or administrative tasks. So answering the phones, forwarding phone calls, setting appointments. They can act as a courier. They can pick up lock boxes, but they would never be able to show properties for sale. They would never be able to negotiate things. They could fill out paperwork. So just even either or could never do full-fledged brokerage activities. The employee of a broker property manager, basically the most special thing they can do, they can show properties that their boss manages for rent. That's the biggest one. Now, as you saw, I kind of showed you the License Law and Commission Rulebook. This is a list that's within that rulebook, just saying what would be allowed of an unlicensed employee of a broker to do. We're not going to read this line by line. There's a lot to it. But if it ever gets into the territory of brokerage in any way, shape, or form, they can't do it, right? As I just said, no negotiations, none of that. So here's kind of the short list of what they can do. They can fill in data on a broker pre-printed draft. Let me tell you what I mean. If I go to a listing appointment and I talk about all the terms with my seller and I write down all the terms on a piece of paper, I could then take that over to my unlicensed assistant and say, hey, type this up, make it look pretty, and then send it over to the sellers, because they're just typing, right? Data entry is okay. One of the biggest things too, let me go ahead and mention this right now. We're going to talk later about trust accounts. Trust accounts are a very specific account where we handle money for others. And so we'll get into the trust account rules later. But one of the things that is actually allowed, that people have a tendency to get confused on the test, is an employee who is unlicensed can handle trust money under the supervision of the broker in charge. Now, I'm just making a statement. Of course, we will talk about that more in the future.
Yeah, I got a question.
What you got?
Can a W-2 not licensed, let's say, person, can they be under a contract that if they sell, let's say, more rentals, like let's say they show rental properties, how you said they don't need a license for that, but if they actually, let's say, close a deal, I guess, or convince somebody to actually sign that lease for that apartment, do they need a license for that? If it's under a contract of a salary base, you know what I mean?
Yeah, meaning they get a bonus for having them sign that lease?
Yeah, like they'll get a bonus, like let's say you get like
That's a problem.
$1,000 or something.
That's a problem. Legally speaking, that's a problem. Because if you are an employee of a broker property manager, you cannot be paid on any per transactional basis. And so if you're getting paid bonuses for closing transactions, that's being paid like a broker. And they're very specific on that. Now, once again, entity owner doing that, not a problem. But an employee of a broker property manager, legally. Now, here's the thing, Alex. Does it happen all the time? Probably. Is it technically legal in the eyes of the Real Estate Commission and license law? No. No. So here's just another quick little rundown of what's okay. Acting as a courier, assisting with compiling documents, recording and depositing money under BIC supervision, as I said before, providing basic property information, scheduling appointments. All of these things would be okay for an unlicensed assistant to do. And then, of course, there are plenty of things that would not be okay. And I will share all these slides with you today as well. So I'll upload them in the chat on the first break also. So you can download them. And then I'll put them in GroupMe as well, just in case you need them. So what they can't do, folks, is anything that would end up constituting brokerage activities. Okay? They can't explain documents. They can't negotiate. Can't host open houses. Cannot show properties for sale. Cannot solicit clients for anybody. All of these would be not okay for an unlicensed person. So let's take this a step further and give you some different examples now that we've explained it, because folks, hands down, I'm telling you right now that whether or not somebody needs a license it's going to be one of the most testable on the North Carolina exam. That and agency concepts, right? Representation, single agency, dual agency. Those are two of the most testable categories, hands down. So it's very important to understand, did I need a license? Did you not need a license? And they're going to give you a lot of examples on the test. I'm going to give you a lot of examples on the test. It'll say such and such did this. Did you need a license? Or better yet, which of the following would need a license? And I'll give you multiple scenarios. And you got to tell me, okay, well, this is the only one that needed a license. Now, just to name something, and you're going to see it a little bit later, there is something out there, it's a conceptual thing for test-taking purposes called a Boolean style question. No, you don't need to memorize that word. It's a rather silly word, but basically it is a style of question where the answers only have two possible values. They're either true or they're false. So in that example I just gave you, which of the following examples would require a North Carolina broker's license? Well, that means that there's going to be 3 scenarios that do not require a license, and there's going to be 1 scenario that does. Do you see what I'm saying? So there's only one of 2 possible values. It either is a true statement, it does require a license, or a false statement, it doesn't. Whether it be a negative or a positive one, it's still one of 2 possible values. The beauty of those styles of questions is sometimes you don't even have to know the right answer. All you have to know is what it's not. Because if you can find the 3 things, I know these don't need a license for sure. Well, that means you automatically have found the one that's the correct answer, because I asked for the one that does need a license. Does that make sense for everybody? So So we'll talk about good test-taking strategies as the course goes on as well. So as we've been saying, you do not need a license if one of these things is missing. And so the business entity exception, as I said, basically is the same as for sale by owner, because it's an entity selling their property, just like an individual owner selling their property. So if any of these are missing, very important to understand, real property for others for compensation requires a license. If you are missing one, no license is needed. Now, some of these slides are redundant, but of course, this is where it kind of takes it a step further from what I said earlier. An attorney practicing law, other people that are affiliated with the business, like appraisers, mortgage bankers, trustees, guardians, executors, all of these people that are just doing their job and not trying to do brokerage activity or in a court-appointed position, they do not need a license. All of these are named under that exemption section under the North Carolina License Law and Rule Book 93A-2. And you don't need to memorize the numbers. So let me ask you another question. You'll find that as we talk about these different concepts, I'll throw some questions into the mix to make sure that you are with me and understanding everything that I have said thus far. So if you were dealing with, well, let me give you this insight piece, folks, and then I'm going to ask you the formal question, okay? Because this is going to come up a lot. I told you that there is no exemption. If it's something of value, okay, it could be use of a car, it could be staying somewhere, it could be $1, it could be a gift card, it doesn't matter. Now, this is a very important concept because in the last class I taught, there is going to be a section where we talk about, things that we collect as real estate brokers and our obligation to disclose money. You've got to keep very similar concepts separate in your mind. So what I'm telling you right now is there is no exemption for this real estate license requirement law. A $5 Starbucks gift card in exchange for real estate brokerage activity would require a license. And if you didn't have one, it would be illegal brokerage activity. Folks, even as trivial as $5 seems. So I'm telling you, answer the questions as I'm teaching them to you, not like, well, that seems silly and nobody should have to disclose that. Or trust me. Okay, no exceptions for this. Anything of value in exchange for real property for others and getting compensation needs a license. Now, there will be an exception to some different laws and rules with this later, but not this. What you got, Bo?
So what about when the transition down, like house already closed, and then like the buyer want to give their agency the gift card, which is not. They didn't receive the compensation, but the house already closed, and then they received the gift card.
Yeah, I mean, remember what we're talking about right now is whether or not you need a license. And so imagine, Bo, that, let's say Priya is right beside you on my screen. Imagine that Priya is your friend without a license, and she assists you in buying a house. And after you close on the house, you turn around and you give Priya an $80 gift card. Well, why did you give her that gift card, Bo?
Because they helped me, and then...
So she got something of value for helping you buy real estate. License was required. That's still illegal. There's no statute of limitations where they say, well, if you wait 6 days, it's fine. And that's how you've got to interpret it on the test. It's if anything of value was exchanged. Now, just to play devil's advocate here, Bo, if you were to send her a really nice Christmas gift, that's going to be real hard to prove, right? But if it's something that you sent her a week after closing, it's pretty obvious why you sent that to her. Does that make sense?
Okay, then how long we can send that gift? Might be after 2 months, 3 months, or is there any time for that?
Let me help you out with this too, okay? Imagine that you tried this in the real world.
Yeah.
And after you get done closing on the house, you hand Priya this gift card. Here's the good news, Bo. I promise there is no employee from the North Carolina Real Estate Commission hiding in the bushes going gotcha, Bo, going to jail. Get in the back of the car, right? Nobody is going to jump out. But if the North Carolina Real Estate Commission was to ever find out that you did this, they're going to look at you and they're going to say, you need to cease and desist. Otherwise, we will seek legal action against you. So from a testable point of view, there's no time frame. There's no statute of limitations. If anything is exchanged of value in exchange for somebody helping you, real property, somebody other than themselves, a license is required. In the real world, are you probably ever going to get caught for this? No.
Got you.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
So here's the question for you, okay? True or false, an unlicensed property owner may compensate an unlicensed person to show rental property and collect rent on their behalf if the unlicensed person does not negotiate on behalf of the owner.
True.
False,
No.
because they're collecting rent.
False.
Another false.
True.
So let's take this one step at a time, okay? I own a house, and I don't have a license. And I don't really want to manage it myself. I call Brenda and I say, Brenda, would you show some people my property? And then would you have them sign a lease agreement? And if you do all this for me, I'll pay you.
Oh yeah, they need a license for that.
Folks, this is property management. Don't get confused on the fact that it doesn't say the word property management.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
It's just a question that's just so stupid. I don't know why they ask it like that. It's just kind of like too complicated, the question. You may have seemed more easier to
Yeah, well, and that's exactly right. And Alex, test writers love to do that. They love to make it convoluted and jargony for no reason. Now, hopefully, I've been told that they're trying to work on that. I don't know that I necessarily believe them. But yeah, you've got to be able to kind of break the information apart and put it in an understandable format. Remember yesterday I said it's 60% material, 40% test taking, because they will word it weird. Okay, they will put it in.
It doesn't say anything about signing the lease. It doesn't say anything about property management, nothing. It says he owns the property. And can he send me to collect on his behalf?
You're showing rental property, and this is not an entity, right? And this is not a property manager, so there's no exception.
Individual.
Yeah, so somebody else showing your rental property, they're basically doing leasing activities.
Okay, it doesn't say it's not an entity or personal person either. So, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, you just got to be careful. So, one of the biggest recommendations I can give to you folks, do not put anything in the question that's not there. Don't be like, well, what if it's an entity? Well, what if it's this? Well, what if it... Don't do that. You just answer with what you have. Now, I agree with you. This is not super detailed, but you've got to train your brains. Don't put things that are in there that are not in there. What you got, Constantine? What were you about to say?
Oh, I was just saying, correct me if I'm wrong. So technically, they could show the property, but when they're getting compensated, that's what makes it not okay. Correct?
Correct. There would be nothing stopping your friend from showing the property for you for free. Hey man, I'm in South Carolina. Would you take that key I gave you and show Constantine my property? He just called me. He's thinking about renting it. Sure, man, I got you. No problem. Nothing's wrong there. Why? Because it was just a favor as a friend. But because we are getting paid, right? Compensate. That's a problem. Robert, what were you going to say?
I was just clarifying that it's false, right?
It is correct. False.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
There you go. False statement. So let me just clarify a couple of things. I talked about the, 1099 a little bit a second ago. Folks, when you get your license, Brenda, you're writing on my screen. What are you doing? Always the troublemaker, Brenda. Come on now. Just don't draw anything weird, okay? I'm going to clear that drawing out.
Sorry.
If you annotate, folks, it will show up for everybody to see. Please don't take control of that and draw anything. I will do it multiple times throughout the class, but yeah. So let me provide some clarity here. When you get your license as a real estate broker, what typically happens, folks, is we'll say employed, but that's not even a really good word for it. And I'll tell you why. You are self-employed as a real estate broker 99% of the time, okay? You are self-employed. You're what's called an independent contractor. And so you basically agree to partner up with a real estate brokerage firm and tag team deals together. But when you make a commission, let's say that you do something and you're due $8,000 in commission, you will get all $8,000 of it. Why? Because you're not an employee. You're an independent contractor that is paid as a 1099, and so they are going to give you the $8,000, and you are responsible for paying the government your taxes. Now, the good thing about being self-employed is you can deduct your business expenses. So when you pay, $300 for photographs, that's tax deductible. When you put wear and tear and gas on your car, that's tax deductible. And we'll talk more about that in the financing situation, later. But there is a big difference between an employee and an independent contractor. And so let's go back to that example that I gave you with the builders. And you're about to see a question in regard to this. You could be either an employee of the builder and as such an extension of the builder and not need a license. Or you could be an independent contractor, real estate broker with a license, and you wouldn't need to be an employee because you are being treated as a broker. And so when I say like an employee of a broker property manager, they're an employee. That broker property manager, 1099. Is everybody kind of following along with me here? So let me work this into a builder style question, okay? We've got Ashley, who's an on-site employee of ABC Builders Incorporated. She is paid an annual salary of $90,000 a year. She meets with potential buyers to show them homes, help them select floor plans, choose options, and prepare purchase agreements. Would Ashley need a North Carolina real estate license?
No.
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 No. Yeah.
No, she's not getting commission.
Yeah, no.
She's salaries.
There you go. She is an employee, folks. For all intents and purposes, she is part of ABC Builders. So ABC Builders is selling their own property. They are negotiating. They can sign purchase agreements. They can do whatever because it is their property. So that is that entity owner exemption, and she is an employee of that entity owner. She does not need a license. Everybody good with that? Now, it is possible for some builders to not have this, but you've got to be very careful with the information we give you on the test. Is this or the relationship that the builder has, or have they hired a licensed broker? It could be either, depending on the context. Let me give you another one here. We got our friend Tom lives in one of his grandparents' triplex units for free. In exchange, he manages the other 2 units. He deals with tenants, orders repairs, collects the rents, etc. Would this be an acceptable setup, or would he need a license?
He would need a license.
Need a license.
He's giving free rent. They're
Yeah.
paying free rent.
There you go. Folks, we can all agree,
Parents and all
yeah, that's something of value, isn't it?
Yeah.
Man, that sounds like a sweet deal to get to live in one of those completely rent-free. I wish these were my grandparents, okay? I'll sell my house right now and move in there and be like, yes, grandmama.
Risk.
Say what? Yeah, there you go. So, absolutely something of value, folks. Anything of value. It does not have to be cash, okay? As I told you before, it could be living in a place. It could be use of something. It could be a gift card. Anything of value. Real property for others for compensation. A license is required.
So, quick question. What if Tom's paying his grandmother, whatever, $100 to live there?
So that's a little more abstract, right? Because then
It depends thing.
that's an adult diapers thing, right? That just depends. Is it obviously subsidized? Yes. Is the commission probably going to get into that? Most likely not. And of course, we will never throw questions like that to you on your test. So,
All right, good.
yeah, there you go. Good question. So here's an example of kind of like a structured question with multiple choice answers for you, okay? So I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to let you read it to yourselves, and when you get the answer, you can put it in the chat, and then we'll talk about it.
I don't think I can see anything.
Say it again.
I'm not seeing anything. The slides, you said?
You're not seeing the slides?
No.
You may just want to adjust your view. You probably changed it. If you look at the top of the Zoom window, you can go to full screen, exit full screen by hitting escape, look at the speaker view, because you should be seeing slides. It's a green slide on the edge, and then a question and some answer choices. And if you play around with it, Fabiola, and you can't get it to work, I would just hop out of Zoom and just hop right back in. Sometimes Zoom just has glitches for people.
Okay.
Yeah. Folks, let's talk about it. Okay, there's a lot of consensus out there. Everybody's saying some B. So Betty is a licensed real estate broker in North Carolina who is managing an apartment complex. She is brainstorming ways to attract new tenants. Which of the following would not be allowable as a promotion? You've got to make sure that you pay attention to words like that, right? Not. And so when you're looking through this is a Boolean style of question. That means 3 of these are going to be allowable and 1 of these is not going to be allowable. And that's the one odd man out, right? One of these things is not like the other. That makes taking these questions or answering these questions a little bit easier for you. So let's just go down the line here. 2 free months of rent for any new tenants who sign a 1-year lease. Well, is that a problem?
No,
Why not?
because she has a license, that she could do that.
Well, she has a license, but the financial benefit is going to the tenant.
Yeah, it's just a lease inspection.
Well, I mean, is it all to the tenant or is it some of it to the apartment complex? Because they make money by renting apartments. So
They do, but remember, even something like $1, I mean, would be a problem. It doesn't really matter as long if any money is going somewhere it's not supposed to. We got a problem. So the question is, why is this not a problem?
They're tenants, they're not old, they're not already current.
Be more specific, Celicia.
It's a promotion for the people like that she's trying to get into the complex.
And so who's getting the financial benefit?
The tenants.
Yeah, the new tenants, right?
We basically just all fail, basically.
Huh?
So it's like we all fail because like
No, hold on, Alex. This one's okay. That's not the answer. Everybody understand this. I'm just trying to help you eliminate this one's okay because it's not for others, is it? It is somebody renting real property. So there's real property. They are getting something of value, 2 free months of rent, but it is not for others. They got the benefit, folks. This is what we call a party to the transaction. It's how I explained to you yesterday. If you were to buy a house today as an unlicensed person and you had the savvy to negotiate money to come back to you, in North Carolina, that's okay. So A is not the answer because that is okay. We're looking for what's not okay. So it's not a problem because you're a party to the transaction. That makes sense for everybody. Now, a lot of you said B. And so B says a free month's rent given to any current tenant who recommend a friend signs a 1-year lease. Well, folks, think about it. You've got somebody living in the apartment complex who is referring somebody to lease real property. So that's not them. It's real property, and they're expecting to get something of value, which is free rent. That is a license is required scenario. It is B. B is not okay because they are not a party to the transaction. Does that make sense? That is somebody else trying to get money from sending somebody to do a brokerage activity. And so that's a problem. So the answer is B, folks. Let's just play devil's advocate and let's run through the last 2. Reducing the price of a 3-bedroom apartment. There's no problem there. Property owner, property manager can unanimously decide to change the prices at will. Nothing stopping them. And then D says offering a $250 referral fee to any licensed real estate agent who brings a tenant that signs a lease. Folks, that's the whole point of having a license. You can get paid for doing brokerage activities. So of course that's fine. I get paid if I help somebody buy. I get paid if I help somebody do a rental. I get paid if I help somebody sell. I get paid if I help somebody manage a property. That's the whole point of having a license, so that you can legally and lawfully be paid for brokerage activities. You got to be very careful on these questions, right? Now, we will talk more about this license activity when a license is required stuff when we circle back around to what we call the license law and commission rules section. We'll kind of reiterate it some, but that's kind of your introduction for when a license is required. So now what we're going to kind of segue into is those license categories, the statuses, some things to be aware of. And I'll tell you why, once again, I'm bringing it in so early. In my opinion, this stuff is incredibly testable. I do not want to wait until the very end of class to introduce these statuses. I'd like to introduce them, rip the Band-Aid first thing, and so then that way you've at least heard them, so when we circle back around to them, you've already heard them before. Everybody with me? So I'm going to put this slide up on the screen, and it is close enough to your break, so I will let you go take a break. It's 7:13. Come back at 7:25. Okay, and then we will talk about all of this fun-filled jazz. So go take a break, come back at 7:25. So let's start talking about more in-depth concepts here. I do want to provide some clarity. Everything that I was just teaching you in regard to a license being required, that's going to be very testable, as I keep saying on the North Carolina portion. You'll find out that, I'll do a really good job of saying, well, hey, this is very North Carolina specific. You could see this on both. Here's the differentiation. And so let me just make sure you understand why that is. Folks, we all understand that lending happens in every single state. Okay? Deeds happen in every single state. Title transfer happens in every single state. There are some general practices from a real estate point of view that absolutely happen in every single state in some way, shape, and form. But then there are things like we just talked about, which are very specific criteria as outlined by our own jurisdictional authority, which just happens to be the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. Every state has their own real estate commission. Now, some of them don't call it that, and that's where there's some nuanced rules and differentiations. So, like I said, an individual property owner could collect money as a purchaser in North Carolina without it being an issue. In other states, that may not be the case. Now, Bo had a question about referral fees, and I'm going to try to clarify it. I just don't want to do it when everybody was already on break. And I believe your question was, Bo, about an individual property owner who was unlicensed giving some kind of compensation to a current tenant of theirs for referring a new tenant for a different rental. Was that the question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and so you made this statement. Once again, I will caution you. You said, well, it seems like it happens. Sure it does. Doesn't make it legal. Because yet again, you are giving somebody without a license money for referring somebody to lease. And so I told you, when we're dealing with LL Beans, if you do offer to do or refer somebody to do those things and it involves real property for others for compensation, a license is legally required in North Carolina. But it goes back to that speed limit sign. Just about everybody in here breaks the law every single day. Doesn't make it the law, right? Even though we all know, hey, I'm probably not going to get arrested or a ticket for 5 over, it's still breaking the law. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Yep.
Got it.
Yeah. So let me take this a step further, folks. When we're dealing with this bifurcated exam, which is just a really fancy word for 2 parts, you've got to, and here's the good news, you will know exactly which portion of the exam you're on. There are some states where it's one exam and it's all together, which just seems sick in my mind. But at a certain point, it also seems nicer because I don't even understand why we have 2 parts to it. But that's a conversation for a different day. So here's the point I'm trying to make here. When you are on the national exam, when you are thinking about the things I'm going to teach you, when you hear me say, this is very North Carolina specific, you better not be thinking about any of that crap when you're on the national exam. Conversely, whenever you're on the North Carolina portion of the exam, you better be thinking about all the things that I said are North Carolina specific. And I will be very intentional in saying, you need to know this very well for North Carolina. This is a national concept. So here's your introduction to some of the differentiation. In North Carolina, I told you yesterday, and hopefully you're a little more prepared for this right now, that we use different language to talk about our licensees, okay? In other states that are not broker-only states, the entry level is called a salesperson. Okay, so if you're looking at the national exam and you see the term salesperson, you should basically interpret that as the equivalent of a provisional broker. It is an entry-level position. It is somebody who cannot do any real estate without being supervised. And that is true in North Carolina. Provisional broker can't do anything without being supervised. And a salesperson in their respective state cannot do anything without being supervised. Everybody okay with that statement? Well, in those states that have salespeople, there's typically only two categories. There is salesperson and there is brokers. Brokers, as the word is interpreted for a real estate broker, is somebody who can operate independently. And that's true in North Carolina, but of course, it's actually in a very limited capacity, which I'm going to teach you in a moment. But a broker can operate independently in all states. Now, in the national section, when it talks about a broker, you will also sometimes see it referred to as an employing broker or managing broker. That's really the only next tier in those states. They're the top banana. In North Carolina, a broker is not the top banana. Yes, they can operate independently, but we have one more step above. And so in North Carolina, the step above that is called the BIC, or the broker in charge. Now, you are never required to become a broker in charge in North Carolina, but you will ultimately have to become a broker, which is, once again, very weird compared to the other states, because in the states that allow salespeople, folks, you can be a salesperson forever. You will just be required to have supervision for forever. Big differentiation here. A provisional broker can only do real estate for 18 months in North Carolina. And so at that point, you either have to become a full broker or stop playing real estate. And I'm going to talk about that a little more in detail. So you will see provisional broker on the North Carolina test. You will see broker, and broker can also be referred to, those AKAs, as non-provisional and full broker. Now, folks, when you see that word non, N-O-N, I want you to read it as not provisional. I cannot tell you how often students make mistakes because they read the word non-provisional and they answer the question as if they were provisional. Hey, Priya, we got matching cups. Yay. So then BIC and BIC eligible are technically two differentiations. We're going to get into that in some more detail. And then, of course, the last two on the North Carolina list, the LNCL, which we talked about a little bit in the Relink book, is a very specific type, limited non-resident commercial license. Good news for that one, folks. You ready for this? There are very few things in this curriculum that are exactly what they sound like. This is one of them that is. The LNCL is exactly what it sounds like. It is limited, it is for non-residents, and it is to transact commercial brokerage only. And so we will talk a little bit more about that one, but it's very straightforward. And then, of course, the last one is a firm license. What did I tell you yesterday a firm license was?
Business?
Yeah, a license for an entity. Your Coldwell Bankers, your Keller Williams, your Century 21s, okay? Now, don't confuse this because we were talking about entities a little bit ago. Microsoft is a business entity, but because Microsoft is not doing real estate, it doesn't need a firm license because it's doing tech sales. But any business that's doing real estate, remember when I read that really convoluted definition to you? And it said any person, partnership, corporation, limited liability company. They're still considered a broker by definition. But we can all agree that a business can't sit in this class. Only a person can. So the way that an entity gets a license is a little bit different. And we'll talk about that too in just a moment. Does everybody kind of understand the parallels and the differentiations between how you're going to see the language on the national portion and how you're going to see the language on the North Carolina portion? Good deal. Also, one last reminder for cameras. I got one that's off and I do not see anything in the chat for you, so just make sure. So, I also gave you this insight yesterday as well, okay? There are these misnomers is what we'll call them, and I already taught you this one. There are things that you accept as something because we use it in the real world that's not necessarily true. That's a misnomer. And so a lot of people think that agent, broker, realtor, they're all synonyms. They're not. Okay? They technically have different meanings. Can you be all of these things simultaneously? Yes. I am all of those things. But you are called a real estate agent because you represent people in a real estate transaction. That's what an agent does, looks after other people. You are called a broker because you have a North Carolina real estate broker's license. But we also said broker means more than just real estate, right? A broker is just somebody who brings together two parties, stockbrokers, mortgage brokers. We just happen to be real estate brokers. And then, of course, realtors are people who join a voluntary trade organization called the National Association of Realtors. Here's a powerful statement. All realtors are brokers, but not all brokers are realtors. So sometimes you will see these different terms used on the test and they may be specific for a reason. Other times, the most common verbiage that you're going to see is just licensee. A licensee meaning somebody who has a broker's license. And at that point, we're not necessarily asking you to differentiate. We're just telling you they do have a license. But yet again, there is a very different answer to the question if it's a provisional broker versus a full broker versus a, on the national portion, a salesperson, and so on and so forth. Now, let me provide the next level of this. Okay, I've been talking about brokers. I've been talking about entities, which we call firms. And so an entity, folks, means you have gone and you have filled out some paperwork with the Secretary of State. If you want to start a company or a business, that's where you go, the North Carolina Secretary of State. And the most common entities that people would create are corporations, LLCs, which stands for limited liability companies, and partnerships. Now, please understand that there's another terminology that comes into play in this class, and that is a sole proprietorship. Folks, listen to me very carefully. A sole proprietorship is a person operating a business. It is not a business entity. There is a huge difference there. Let me give you the real world example. For about a year and a half, I operated as a sole proprietor. I did not have an entity created with the Secretary of State. I used my broker's license to run a real estate business through myself. That is a sole proprietorship. And so a sole proprietorship never, ever, 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 ever needs a firm license because it's just a people. And they have a people's license that we call a broker or broker's license. Does that statement make sense? But when you create an entity, well, let's go back to your Keller Williams or Coldwell Bankers. Folks, can we all agree that if you create a business and you open business accounts in the name of that business, and then you take a real estate commission check and deposit it in there, that you just paid something for brokerage activity? Anything that's getting paid for brokerage activity needs a license, whether it be a people or an entity. And so these businesses need a firm license. What you got, Alex?
Can you be have your own, I said firm license and be your own W-2? Like have your own LLC and be the W-2 of your own LLC?
Yes. You be an employee of your LLC?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, that's actually a really big benefit. When you get your real estate license, a lot of people will create an entity and they will get all of their compensation into that entity and then name themselves as an employee of that entity and pay themselves a salary, which gives you some tax advantages because then you're taxed at a different rate. And then as the owner, you can give yourself disbursements as opposed to, employee compensation. So, but that's outside of the scope of this class, but yes. So because these entities, these businesses that have been created with the Secretary of State are getting paid for real property for others for compensation, they need a license. So only entities get firm licenses. Everybody else has a people's license. It's called a broker's license. So I'm going to say it again. A sole proprietor never, ever, ever needs a firm license because they are a business running through a person. They have not created an entity with the Secretary of State. I'm going to let that sink in for a second. So here's the visual. Real estate brokers are people who need a broker's license, and that's what it's called. And then real estate firms are companies that need a firm license. And anybody or anything that is getting paid, and it falls under the criteria of LO Beans and Real Property for Others for Compensation, needs a license to lawfully be paid. Coldwell Banker can lawfully be paid because they have a firm license. I can lawfully be paid because I have a broker's license. Is this making sense? Now let's take it one step further and talk about one of the most confusing aspects of this, folks. There is this realization you have to have. When I asked you about Microsoft, obviously Microsoft doesn't have anything to do with real estate, but you can understand it's a business. And so I asked you to tell me who Microsoft was, and you can't tell me anybody, can you? Right? Like, there's no one person you can name and say, "Oh, yeah, that's Microsoft." Right? Even if you tried Bill Gates, nope, that's not Microsoft. And so you have to understand that it's not always obvious whether we are dealing with an entity or whether we are dealing with a sole proprietorship. Let me explain. In North Carolina, I, for a period of time, operated as a sole proprietor, which means I used my broker's license and I ran my business through me and I didn't have a firm. Well, as long as I meet certain other criteria, which is being a BIC, and we're going to talk more about that in a second, I also legally had the right to affiliate other brokers with me as a sole proprietorship. So let's say that every single one of you got your license and you became a provisional broker and you needed to affiliate to activate it. You could all affiliate with me as a sole proprietor. Now here's where people get confused. A lot of times when you hear the word sole proprietor, you want to think that there's only one person. Folks, there are 40 of us in this room right now. If all of you were affiliated with me as a sole proprietor and we were acting as a sole proprietorship, we got a heck of a lot more than one person, don't we? But there's still no business entity. We are all still operating under the authority of my license as a sole proprietor broker and all of your licenses as affiliated licensees. Now, conversely, if I said that there was a firm out there called ABC Realty, folks, it is possible, even though your mind immediately thinks that a firm has a lot of people, it is possible for a firm to only have one person. So I'm going to skip forward here for a second. I want to ask you a question. Okay, look at this gentleman right here. I want you to tell me if he is operating as a sole proprietor or if he's operating as a firm.
Depends.
Adult diapers. It depends. Folks, is there any possible way to know just from looking at this gentleman? No.
Seems kind of professional.
he seems professional. He's obvious. Somebody's pulling the strings. Nobody would dress that nice on their own volition, right? Is that what we're going with? Folks, there's no way to know. He could be operating independently with a broker's license, or he could have created an entity and be operating as an entity with a firm license. Because at the end of the day, even when a business exists, who's working with the public? People. Does that make sense? Let me flip the coin here. Look at this lovely group. Anna Grace, right? They look professional too, don't they? I tell you, a little too professional.
It's like a dentist commercial.
Yeah, it kind of does. They got really nice teeth too. You're absolutely right. Sole proprietorship or firm?
Depends. I mean, it does. We don't know.
Yeah. Folks, let me ask you a question here. Okay, you ready for this? What do you get if you mix an elephant and a rhino?
Hell if I know.
There you go, Rob. You knew it. A hell if I know. Folks, there is no possible way to tell. And that's very important to understand. Do not get so caught up on, oh, it's a sole proprietor, it's definitely one person. No. You have to look for other details. Because let me explain something. If you're answering a question about a 60-person firm or a 60-person sole proprietorship, those may be very different answers. They may be very similar answers. You'll see what I mean more in a minute. Conversely, please understand that you could have a 60-person sole proprietorship and a one-person firm, which means a firm is more restricted than the sole proprietorship. Those words really only come down to, are you operating with a broker's license and a business passing through a person, sole proprietorship, or are you operating through a firm license and an entity that was created with the Secretary of State and affiliated licensees within there, which would be a firm? So very important distinction to make. And I'm going to backtrack here. Firm, quite literally, is a licensed business entity. Only businesses dealing with real estate need a broker's license called a firm license. As I said, Microsoft wouldn't need this. They're not doing real estate. But anything, Keller Williams, Coldwell Banker, Century 21, they all need firm licenses because they're getting paid for real estate brokerage. What you got? Somebody got a question? So
basically, a firm is just anything that is in the real estate field with legal paperwork that requires a license is a firm.
Yeah, any registered business with the Secretary of State that wants to be legally compensated for brokerage activity is a firm. Yep, and they get a firm license. Now, folks, let me just go ahead and circle back around, okay? We all understand, as I mentioned a few moments ago, that a firm cannot, a business entity cannot sit in this class like you can. And so the way that a firm gets a license is by having what's called a qualifying broker. In other words, somebody with a broker's license is one of the owners of that entity, and as such allows the entity to get a firm license. So there's an application process to get a firm license for your entity that you created as one of the broker owners. Does that make sense? Now we're going to talk more about the qualifying broker and the differentiation between that and the BIC in just a moment. But this is kind of important from a testable point of view to be able to discern these different topics, right? Sole proprietorship versus firm. One-person sole proprietorship versus 50-person sole proprietorship. And then one-person firm versus a 50-person firm, because that's going to change the context of the questions greatly. What you got, Candace?
Don't yell at me. But
do I look like a yeller?
No. But can you a little bit explain sole propriety, just like in elementary term? Because I'm a little confused with that. I'm sorry.
No, don't be. Look at this list right here. What did I tell you that a broker can do?
He can sell property.
They can operate without supervision. Okay? And so if I am a full broker in North Carolina, or a broker in any state for that matter, it means that I can go out and do brokerage activities. You can operate independently. So let's say, as a full broker, I don't work for Keller Williams, I don't work for Coldwell Banker, I don't work for any of them. It's just me, Seth Chauncey, with a real estate broker's license. I have the authority to go out and transact real estate business and be paid for it because I am a licensed broker. Does that make sense? Well, I'm in the business of real estate, but all that business is operating through me. And so I'm called a sole proprietorship or a sole proprietor because it's all me. You know what that means, Candace? If I go out and I help somebody buy a house and I screw up royally, they're suing me, Seth Chauncey. Now, conversely, if I was an affiliated broker of Coldwell Banker, well, that means really it's Coldwell Banker representing the public, and I'm an extension of Coldwell Banker. And so if I screw up royally, they're suing Coldwell Banker, who has errors and omissions insurance, and they've got their own separate accounts. They're not going after individual people, they're going after business. That's all it comes down to. is I am operating under the authority of a broker's license that I have, and I'm passing everything through myself. It's kind of the same thing. Can you all agree that if you wanted to, you could really wake up tomorrow and start a house cleaning business and run it through yourself? You don't have to have an entity. You would want to probably get some insurance, okay? But you could just say, well, I'm operating as a house cleaner, and you just start running it through you, Candace Shaw. You would be a sole proprietor. Now, not a real estate one, because you wouldn't need a real estate license for that either. Does that make sense? Yeah, that's all it is. It's just, as a broker, I have the authority to operate without anybody else, and I don't have to create an entity. So because I have it, folks, this is my license right here. That piece of paper on the wall tells me I can go out and sell real estate. Now, a provisional broker can't do it, even though you're going to get this because of your status, and that's where we're going to get into next. But as long as you meet certain criteria, like being a full broker and sometimes being a BIC, you can do it. But that's all it comes down to. No entity was created with the Secretary of State. I didn't have to because I have the ability to operate with my license, called a sole proprietorship.
So how come a firm could be, how you said, just one person? Isn't that a sole?
No. Don't think it. See, and that's what I'm saying. Don't think of it as sole as in one person. You've got to remove that. Sole means it's all passing through one person, quite literally passing through one person. So Alex, if I affiliated as a sole proprietor, I could, under the right circumstances, affiliate you and Vincenzo and Bo and Fabiola. Y'all all work underneath me. We're still a sole proprietorship because at the end of the day, you all work underneath me, the sole proprietor. So if you get in trouble, I'm also in trouble. But you're not affiliated with an entity, you're affiliated with a person. Yeah. Celisa says, like a barber. Yeah, kind of like that. So as I give you more examples, this will start to make more and more sense here. Because, folks, the difference is I don't have to create an entity. The reason that people who can operate independently as a broker create entities is kind of the two things that we talked about already. Tax benefits and liability protection. Folks, if I stay a sole proprietor and I mess up, they're suing me. They're coming after my house, my car, my bank accounts. So a lot of times people will create business entities to create a layer of protection. If Microsoft screws up, they're not suing Bill Gates, they're suing Microsoft Corporation. There's this layer of protection. But it really comes down to is, well, how have you legally set up? Is everything running through as something you created, or is it all running through you, sole proprietor? But the biggest thing to understand is you can't automatically think, oh, there's only one just because it said sole proprietor. And you can't automatically think that there's multiple just because I said firm. You need more details in the question, otherwise you can screw up royally. Let me give you an example of this. Folks, when we get into the agency conversations, there are times where we would appoint people to look after one person very specifically in a transaction that's within our organization. And they would appoint another person to look after the opposing party within our organization. Well, folks, if our organization has one person, would that be possible? No. If you don't have different people to appoint to look after people, then that creates an issue. And so that's where you've got to be able to understand, are we talking about a firm with only one person? Because a firm with only one person, while it may sound like it's a big thing, it's very limited in what it can do because there's still only one person, even though they've created an entity. We're going to give you some more examples as time goes on. Now, let me throw the kind of more trivial one into the mix. Here's that LNCL, okay, Limited Non-Resident Commercial License. This is, as I said, exactly what it sounds like. It is limited. It is for people who do not live in North Carolina, and it is to transact commercial brokerage only. Whether you realize this or not, there are companies that do major commercial development all across the country. And it would not make sense to make these companies have an employee that has 50 licenses. Folks, that's a lot of class to take. Imagine how much class you're taking for this one. To have 50 licenses would be asinine. So here's what we basically say, okay? In North Carolina, there's a special category. Well, hey, listen, Slick, as long as you got a license that's active in another state, We will allow you to come play in our sandbox, but only our commercial sandbox, so long as you have a declaration of affiliation with a resident broker, and as long as there's a cooperation agreement between you and this resident broker. So basically, this resident broker would supervise your activities to make sure you follow our laws or rules. So it does have an application process. It does have a yearly renewal fee, but it is temporary. Eventually, when you leave North Carolina, you're just going to let it lapse and you're going to go away. Special category. One of the rare things that's exactly what it sounds like. Because you're licensed in another state, as long as you follow these certain rules and jump through these certain hoops, we will let you come into our state and play in the commercial sandbox only, without having to take pre-licensing. Just want to make sure nobody's thrown up in their mouths yet, have they?
So what is the difference between the broker license and the BIC, the big license? It looks like it's no difference. If you have the broker license, you can have your own foreign business entity.
No, unfortunately, Bill, I'm just giving you baby steps right now. I haven't given you the full truth yet. I'm kind of working up towards that. Hang tight.
Okay.
Yeah, haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
Yep.
And the person that is actually giving me that contract for the commercial license, the person that is actually giving me that contract, they need a license for that or no?
The declaration of affiliation and the cooperation agreement.
Yeah, like let's say I go to Texas and they have a certain amount of rules. Whoever I'm gonna be, who's gonna give me that? The person that is gonna give me that, do they have to have a real estate license?
Now understand, let me just give you a double-faceted answer here. I can't speak to whether Texas even has this, right? I know North Carolina has this. So let's say, for instance, somebody from Texas wanted to come to North Carolina. They would have to have a declaration of affiliation with somebody licensed in North Carolina and a cooperation agreement in place with somebody licensed in North Carolina that basically says they're going to supervise them. And then once they have that in place, they would go to the Real Estate Commission and apply for this license. It is the North Carolina Real Estate Commission that would give you the authority to legally transact this in North Carolina.
Okay.
Yep.
So you need like 4,000 hours of like real estate work to be a dick?
Nope.
Just like full time for class is like full time?
Yeah, there's a criteria there. We're gonna I'll talk about that a little bit in a second. I will tell you though, it might be changing soon, but it won't affect any of you on your test. But it is 2 years of full-time experience within the past 5 years. We're going to talk more about that in just a moment. So first and foremost, folks, let's talk about North Carolina, okay? Now let's just really focus on North Carolina. When you all complete this class, I said when, not if. I'm rooting for you, okay? When you all complete this class and you go on and you take your state licensing exam and you pass it, every single one of you will get this exact same piece of paper, but instead of it saying my name, it'll say your name. And instead of having my license number, it'll have your license number. Now, it's kind of itty bitty box, so you probably can't read it, but that's what's on there. It is given to me by the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. Now, please understand that every person in North Carolina gets a broker's license. But what it comes down to is different statuses. So your license will look exactly like my license, but you will be on a different status. It is always issued to new licensees in North Carolina as provisional status. And I told you yesterday, that's like training wheels. You cannot operate freely with training wheels. As a provisional broker, you can't do anything. So you'll get this big, pretty license, but you can't use it yet. And it's exactly like training wheels. Folks, yeah, you may think that you can go off and ride as a kid with training wheels, but are your parents going to leave you unattended and let you go nuts at 4 years old with training wheels on and just hope for the best? Back in my day, that's what we did. All right, well, listen, okay? That's not how we do it anymore because the world is crazy. So no, we cannot leave you unattended to go out and do whatever when you have no idea what you're doing. You are an itty bitty little baby in the world of real estate when you get your license. And as such, you can't be trusted to not off yourself, metaphorically speaking, just like babies in the real world. So as a provisional broker, you get your license also on inactive status. Okay. Now these terms are very testable. Inactive means you can't use it. Yes, you have a license, but your license has to be what we call current and active to be able to use it. Well, when it gets issued, it's current. Current means you paid the money to have a license. And so there is money that you have to pay every year to renew your license to keep it current. Here's the way to remember it. Currency keeps you current. Failure to pay those expenses will make you expired. So current versus expired always has to do with, did you pay your yearly dues? We'll say it again. Currency keeps you current. Failure to pay those expenses make you expired. Very important. Now, folks, if you don't pay your dues, expired is a standalone topic, okay? We don't call you anything else except expired. Doesn't matter if you're good on everything else in the world. You're just called expired if you didn't pay your money. So you got to pay to play, as they say. That rhymes. You're welcome. So here's what happens. You get your license issued. It is on provisional and inactive status. So you have a license, but you can't use it. The only thing that you have to do to activate your license is affiliate with a broker in charge. That's it. In North Carolina, the BIC is the person who can supervise other people. So you have to affiliate with a broker in charge. Now that broker in charge could be a broker in charge of a sole proprietorship. It could be the broker in charge of a firm. You've got options. But once you affiliate with a BIC, they can activate your license, and now you can go out and play real estate. That's all it takes. Now, folks, when you activate, there is nothing stopping you from selling 700 houses that first week. As long as it's current and active, you can use it.
So, if we not activate it and then we take 90 hours post licensing course, we cannot get the broker license. We still need to be under the broker in charge first to be activated.
So here's the little smackerel of honey that I'll give you. Okay. If you take your post licensing 3 30-hour courses. That is all it takes to move from provisional to full broker. Now I'm gonna say something and then I'm going to say something else. So listen to me very carefully. Okay? If you take your post licensing and move to full broker status and you've never affiliated with a BIC, you've never activated your license, you've never done anything, now that you are a full broker, also called a non-provisional broker, also just called a broker, you could activate your own license now without a broker in charge. You have to know that for the test. Now, hold on. It's not as good as it sounds. I'm going to teach you why in a second. But here's the non-testable portion of this. For the love of God, do not do that. You need somebody to teach you how to do this crap. You will never accidentally get it right, folks. Real estate agents are the top sued profession next to doctors. Hands down. Do not activate your own license and go out and be a broker for people without working under somebody and learning how to do it. I must impress this upon you. You will lose your license very quick. You will go to jail. You will get sued. Can you activate your own license as a full broker in a limited capacity? It's basically worthless. Spoiler alert. You'll see that in a second. Yes, you can activate it. Should you do that? No. And you'll see why in a moment. Does that make sense for everybody?
I'm just a little confused. So once we get our license, right, they're only provisional broker license. They're only active if we work with a supervised broker in charge to become active. We have to do 18 months as a provisionary broker?
No. Mm-mm. You can only be provisional for 18 months maximum.
Okay.
Which means you have to move from a provisional broker to a full broker sometime within your first 18 months of licensure. Yep.
Okay. And And so we don't have to go back and take we don't have to go back and take the post-licensing education class, right? The 90 hours, unless we want to activate our own license.
No. You have to take those classes because the training wheels are only allowed to stay on for 18 months.
Oh, okay, I get it. So during those 18 months, we need to take those 90 hours of post-licensing education to remove the provisional part.
Yeah. Let me give you a scenario here, Darlene, because you're onto it now. Folks, let's say that you all get your license on the same day, okay? Let's just say, what is it, April, May, June? You get your license on June 20th, okay? Every single one of you. You've got 18 months from June 20th that you are allowed to take to get your post-licensing done. So let's say on June 20th, you get your license, your provisional, you go and you affiliate with a broker in charge. Every single one of you is now active. You can go out and you can sell real estate. But after 18 months has transpired, let's say that none of you have taken your post-licensing. They will inactivate your license on 18 months and 1 day because you failed to meet your education criteria of 18 months. Now, the only way that you can fix that is becoming a full broker. You cannot play with training wheels anymore. So you will be deactivated because you did not get it done in the allotted amount of time. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense.
So this is another thing that's very testable, folks. You will get test questions that say, which of the following would be the best explanation of how to move from a provisional broker to a full broker? One of the options is going to be affiliating with a broker in charge. Don't pick that. That's how you activate a provisional license. That's not what makes you a full broker. What is the only thing that it takes in North Carolina to move from provisional to full broker?
Take the class.
Take the 3 30-hour post-licensing classes. Folks, there is nothing stopping you from the day that you get your license. You could have them all done in less than a week, which means you could have a week-old license and be a full broker. Because the only thing that it takes to move from provisional to full broker is 3 30-hour post-licensing classes. Total of 90 hours. That is 301, broker relationships and responsibilities, 302, contracts and closings, and 303, NC laws, rules, and legal concepts. You knock those out, congratulations, you're a full broker.
Are those testable?
The names testable, or do those classes require a test?
Do they require a test?
Yes, but it is nothing like this one. The success rate is 99.9%, Rob. Yeah. It's where we get to teach you the actual practical brokerage stuff.
And do you take them right after you get your license, or do you have to wait? Like I think I heard you got to wait like 3 days after you get your actual.
Technically, you need to have your license issued because we have to have your license number to report it. But as long as you have your license number, you can take them.
Okay.
Yep. So let's reiterate. Go ahead. Somebody got a question? Somebody was about to ask something. It's okay. There's always a lot of questions in this section. So let's recap here. When you get your license issued in North Carolina, it is issued on what 2 statuses? Provisional and inactive. There you go. Your license is issued on provisional and inactive. How do you activate your provisional broker's license in North Carolina?
Be under a broker in charge.
There you go. Affiliate with a broker in charge. That's all it takes to activate your license. Affiliate with a broker in charge. How do you move from provisional to full broker?
90 hours. 90 hours of post-education.
There you go. 90 hours of post-licensing education. There you go. I'm feeling good about this. Okay, this is very testable. Y'all are tracking with it. I like it. Okay. So, inactive, you can't use it. I told you the only status you can use your license on is current and active. Okay, and I told you currency keeps you current. It's all about paying your money. Well, when you get your license initially, that's called an issuance. And then every year, we have a fiscal year that runs from July 1 to June 30th. Which means we're actually ending the year soon. Okay, so we are currently in what's called the 2023-2024 licensing year. So that refers to the year that it starts in and the year that it ends in. So the current licensing year that we're in started on July 1 of 2023 and it will end on June 30th of 2024. Does that make sense? So you have to renew your license, meaning pay a renewal fee, every year by June 30th. Because basically what happens is every single one of our licenses technically expires. But as long as you paid your money, they reissue you a new one every July 1st. No, there's not a new piece of paper. This is the same piece of paper I've had for 8 years, 9 years, whatever it is. But it's a metaphorical thing from a licensing point of view, right? As long as you paid your money, they say, yeah, no, we considered yours reissued. Does that make sense?
A quick question. So I know with the provisional license, you have up until 18 months before it becomes inactive again. What about when you're a full broker? Are you also limited in time for that status?
Hang tight on that because I'm not ready to answer that question yet. It's a good question. I just can't answer it yet because I got to give you a little bit more information first.
No problem.
Yep. If we get our license in June of this year, will we have to pay again July this year? And I'm sorry, please pronounce your name for me again so I don't mess it up.
Oh, you can just call me Shia.
That's right, Shia. Shia, that is such an amazing question, and I'm so glad you asked that, folks. Here's the really interesting thing. The short answer is yes, okay? The short answer is yes. They do not prorate it in any way, shape, and form. So let's say that you got your license issued on June 1st. You would have to pay your renewal fees on June 30th. As such, the commission, it's not like written in stone, but what they typically do, so keep this in mind, if let's say that you get your license, your test done, you pass everything on like June 20th, what they typically do is they don't issue any licenses that close to the end of June. They will basically inform you that your license will be issued on July 1st. Now, like I said, it's not set in stone and it's not testable, but mine was actually issued in June. And so they called me and they said, do you want us to issue your license now or would you like to wait until July 1st? Because if we issue it now, you'll have to pay the renewal fees. I don't know if they're making that phone call. You know, since it's not set in stone, I'm not sure what the exact criteria is. But just know that if they give you your license sometime in June, you will be paying renewal fees on June 30th. Now, the other really good question that Jamila asked is how much is it annually? $1 billion, Jamila. It's 45. That's it. $45. You do need to know that. 45 bucks. I had to say something crazy because if I said like 1,000, you would have believed me, right? And so I had to say 1 billion. Otherwise, you all would have been panicking. $45 every year to renew your license. That's it. Now, folks, there are other costs associated with being a real estate professional. We'll talk about those later or maybe not at all because I don't want to freak you out. But $45 every year to renew your license. Now, once again, that renewal is all about money. Renewal fee is what it's called. So that currency keeps your license current. Okay? Failure to pay that currency or those expenses makes your license expired. Everybody cool with that statement? So as you've already told me, okay, because we're going to build a progression here. And folks, please don't mistake it. You know, it's never that I don't want to answer your questions. Sometimes when you got a good group like y'all are a fantastic group. I can already tell that about you. Your wheels start turning, which I love, which provokes some really fantastic questions. And sometimes I just have to defer because it's kind of like A Few Good Men with Jack Nicholson, right? You can't handle the truth, right? I can't tell it to you yet because if I explained it to you, you're not ready for it. So sometimes you ask questions and it's not that I don't want to answer them. I got to build it up a little bit more before I can give you the big picture. But as long as everybody's feeling good, I'm feeling good about it. So off to a good start. So moving from provisional to full broker only takes your post-licensing education. And as I said, 3 30-hour post-licensing classes. As I mentioned earlier, folks, that is the maximum amount of time you can have training wheels. And remember what I said, and it should kind of come full circle now. In the states where you can be a salesperson, You can be a salesperson forever. But in North Carolina, while that is our equivalent level of a salesperson, you eventually have to become at least a broker in North Carolina if you want to continue to operate. Whether you learn to ride a bike or not, whether you ever rode that bike or not, we basically rip those training wheels off and we say the only way to play after 18 months is as a full broker. So if you are affiliated as a provisional broker on active status doing real estate deals and you do not get your post licensing done, you will go inactive. It is impossible to be active as a provisional broker past 18 months. Very important to understand, everybody. That makes sense for you, yeah? Now, the good news is that's the only punishment if you don't get it done within 18 months. You got to stop doing any real estate and you got to get them done. And then once you get them done, now you can reactivate and you can go back to playing real estate again. But for that time that you are inactive, cease and desist. Folks, this is very important, okay? In North Carolina, if you do anything that constitutes illegal brokerage activity, you have forfeit your entitlement to compensation. Let me explain this. If you are a provisional broker and you are working a $6 million deal and it's set to close in a week from now and your 18 months hits and you go inactive, if you go to that closing, you have now done illegal brokerage activity. You don't get a penny, nor does your firm.
Dang.
Yeah, they don't play no games. Now here's the good news. In the real world, if you go inactive, your firm will assign somebody else to finish it as they legally and lawfully can do, and that'll make more sense in the agency section. And you can actually be paid for the things you did while you were current and active, so long as you never did anything inactive. We'll talk more about that in the license law section. So 18 months to get your provisional broker status dropped. Okay, so as a PB, I keep saying it, it is basically your training wheels. You are learning the ways of Mr. Miyagi. Somebody's got to teach you how to do this real estate thing. So the broker in charge who you affiliate with and activate, well, it's not just a fun-filled little thing that you have to do. They are actually responsible for providing active and direct supervision of you. Okay? They have to. And so this is where they keep you out of trouble. They make sure that you learn what you're doing. And for the love of all things sacred, you need this. You need to learn what you're doing. Don't just go out there. Okay? Don't be like, I got a license. Folks, let me explain something to you. Imagine getting your license in the mail like this. And after you put in this hard work to pass this class, I'm sure you will all be excited to receive this in the mail. Now imagine that you want the world to know that you just got your license. And you take a picture of it and you put it on Facebook and you say, you're looking at the newest licensed real estate broker in North Carolina. Call me for all your real estate needs. Congratulations, you broke the law in your first 5 seconds of having a license. Because you just advertised brokerage services on inactive status. That's why you need supervision. Otherwise, you're going to break the law every 5 seconds. Do provisional brokers get paid? For show. Kirsten's right. They get paid. If they close stuff, right? They don't just get paid for being there. But yeah, they close stuff.
We can still be contractors, right?
Independent contractors, yep.
Okay.
Yep, independent contractors. So let me explain another piece. This is very testable in North Carolina, because why not just throw it in here, okay? Like just a lot of ripping that Band-Aid in this class. As a provisional broker, you can only be supervised by one broker in charge at a time. Folks, there are thousands of brokers in charges across the state. There are thousands of real estate firms. You've got lots of options to choose from when you get your license. Yay, you. There is a rule, and it's kind of a two-part rule. And what it basically says is, as I just mentioned, a provisional broker can only be under the supervision of one BIC at a time. And so that means when you become a newly licensed baby broker, provisional broker, you cannot join Keller Williams under one of their BICs and Coldwell Banker under one of their BICs at the same time. You can't do it because that would be two BICs for a provisional broker. That's not allowed. Now, there's one exception, because I told you in this class there are not a whole lot of absolutes. There's exceptions to just about everything. Here's one for this. There is a rule that says you can be under a team BIC and a office BIC at the same time as long as they're all working in the same physical office space. So let me give you an example. If you were to join Coldwell Banker HPW Cary office, and there was a team called the Awesome Brokers team, and that team had a BIC and that office had a BIC because they're in the same physical office location, the Real Estate Commission says you can be duly affiliated with both of them because they are doing transactions as one unit, basically, even though there are two BICs. That'll make more sense as we get into a little bit deeper. But that is an exception to that rule. Otherwise, can a provisional broker duly affiliate? No. And all duly affiliating means is you are registered with both in the eyes of the commission. Now, let me throw a wrench in the system. A full broker can be duly affiliated. Folks, when you are a full broker, if you, for instance, wanted to work with Coldwell Banker at the mountains and affiliate with them, and Keller Williams at the beach and affiliate with them, you can. You've got a North Carolina broker's license. You are legally allowed to do brokerage in the whole state. The only thing that it would require is consent of those broker in charges. It doesn't even have to be written. It's verbal consent. If they say it's okay, it's okay. That's for a full broker.
Is that the thing you want to practice in two different states as well? Do you have to have permission from both?
No, because every single state has their own jurisdictional authority. Your license means nothing in South Carolina as a North Carolina broker.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Now, the only exception to that may be like if there's firms, your firm could have a policy, right? If there's like a firm that has, an office in North Carolina, but also does stuff in South Carolina, like on the Charlotte border, they may have a policy that states that, you can't be affiliated with another firm across, but there's nothing in the laws that state that because it's all jurisdictional, completely separate states. So when you decide to take your post-licensing courses, that is all it takes, 3 30-hour post-licensing, take them as fast as you want, and within 18 months, you can move from provisional broker to a non-provisional. Folks, from here on out, your favorite, this is the cheesiest thing ever, your favorite breakfast cereal now, you know what it is? It's called Synonym Toast Crunch. You got to know all the synonyms of every single word out there because there are so many AKAs, also known as, I told you. You could be tested on the North Carolina portion, and we could call it a non-provisional broker, just a broker, or a full broker. Those all mean the exact same thing. Okay, the exact same thing. Don't you ever answer the question we're asking about a non-provisional broker. You better read it, as I said, as not provisional, not provisional. Everybody with me on that? The only thing it takes to move to not provisional or non-provisional is your post-licensing. And as I just mentioned, you can be duly affiliated as long as you have verbal consent from your BICs. And you can, here's that little smack roll again, you can legally activate your own license without a broker in charge as a non-provisional broker in North Carolina. But in a very limited capacity. I'm going to give you some more on that in just a second, okay?
Wait, what is a BIC again?
What is a what?
What is a BIC?
Broker in charge.
Oh, okay.
Yep. There you go. So let me ask you a question based on everything I've told you thus far, see how you're feeling, and then I'll give you the clarity on really and truthfully what you need to know about a non-provisional broker or a full broker, also just called a broker, okay? So here's a question for you. Which of the following would be a correct statement regarding a provisional broker in North Carolina? Take a look at them. Tell me what you think.
See?
There you go. You're looking pretty unanimous here. Folks, it is in fact C. A provisional broker can become a full broker as fast as they want by taking the 90 hours of post-licensing. The only rule is you cannot take them in the same physical time space. So we offer post-licensing just like this via Zoom. You cannot be in 301 on one computer and 302 on another. They are not allowed to overlap, but that's the only rule. So, I mean, you could take them really in like 6 days if you had like morning, night, you know, I mean, it's possible. So, let me backtrack here, okay? I want to explain this big piece to you. And I'm going to reiterate this multiple times throughout, okay? I keep alluding to the fact that it's a very limited capacity. Can activate their license without a broker in charge and operate independently as a sole proprietor in a very limited capacity. Let me explain what this means. Folks, if you activate your license as a full broker in North Carolina with no broker in charge, there are 3 things you cannot do. You ready for this? You cannot advertise your brokerage services in any way, shape, and form. You cannot have a trust account. And you cannot affiliate other brokers. Now let's focus on this first one for a second. You cannot advertise. Folks, you cannot pass out business cards. You cannot have a website. You cannot tell people by word of mouth that you are a real estate broker. Nothing. Does that sound useful in any way, shape, and form? So when I state that you can activate your own license as a full broker and operate independently as a full broker, it's true. So long as you never pass out business cards, never advertise, never affiliate with the brokers, never have a trust account. What it's basically used for is collecting referral fees from people who know you're a real estate broker and for assisting unsolicited buyers. Once again, people who know you are an agent. So if somebody who knows you are a broker from when you were active comes to you and says, can you help me buy a house? Sure you can. Because you didn't try to solicit that business. They found you. It's kind of worthless, isn't it? Let me tell you the reason why that status is typically used. If you get your license and you use it for a little while, and after a while you say, man, this sucks. This is not what I thought it was. This is not what I wanted to do. Folks, don't you let that license lapse because you never know when you'll want it again. What you do is you keep it current and active and you leave it sitting on that status. That way, if anybody you worked with in the past wants to send you a referral, you can legally accept it because you are licensed. Or if your brother wants to buy a house, you can help them buy a house and collect the commission. So understand, folks, that even when you become a full broker, most people stay affiliated with a firm and a broker in charge. Because you kind of have to be able to do everything you want to do to have a successful brokerage business. Does that make sense? So I told you it's not recommended. Don't do this. But from a testable point of view, if I ask you, can a full broker activate their own license and practice real estate? Absolutely they can. As long as it's not, there's no advertisements, there's no trust accounts, and there's no other affiliated brokers. Blah. Folks, go take a break. Come back at 8:40. Boop, boop. Yeah, what you got?
Okay, so I just want to go back on the whole, what you were just talking about with the whole, you can't advertise if you're a full broker. I was just talking to my mom and dad downstairs, which you're already aware are currently brokers themselves. They were saying that if you advertise a listing, for example, it has to include the firm. So is that what you were saying in terms of advertising, or just in general? You can't advertise yourself as a broker.
You can't advertise yourself as a broker at all. What you're referring to is called a blind ad. So when you do have the legal authority to advertise, it has to contain the name of your firm or sole proprietorship in that advertisement. So for instance, if you said, new 3-bedroom, 4-bath home for sale in Wilmington, call Constantine. That's a blind ad because is Constantine the owner? Is he the sibling of the owner? Is he a broker? We don't know. So that's what they're talking about. It has to contain the name of the sole proprietorship or the firm so that when you pick up the phone and you call somebody that you are going to be talking to a real estate professional. So when I'm talking about a full broker operating independently with no firm, they can't advertise at all. You are not allowed to tell anybody that you are a real estate agent. Even though you're on active and current status, if you are a sole proprietor, full broker operating independently, no advertising in any way, shape, or form. What it basically comes down to, if somebody passes you in the street and they say, "You smell like a real estate broker. Can you help me buy a house?" You say, "Yeah, thank you for noticing. I sure can." But you didn't advertise, right?
Right.
And so that begs the other question. A lot of times students will ask, well, what about listings? Can't you do listings? Folks, how on God's green earth are you going to tell the world that you have a house for sale if you can't advertise? So the answer is no listings at all. Let me show y'all this. And then, so I got another question in the chat, and so y'all are asking really good questions. Let me see if I can find this fast enough to show you. And the laws and rules, it's kind of in a weird place. Let me see. It's under the broker in charge rule. So page 58A.011. Oh. Yeah, broker in charge rule. Here you go. So this is one of the laws and rules, and so this is what I'm teaching you. I'm just teaching it to you in a more layman's term kind of thing. So this is what we call the broker in charge rule, 58A.0110 in the commission rules section. And so every sole proprietorship, meaning somebody operating with a broker's license with no firm, shall designate a BIC if the sole proprietorship engages in any transaction where a broker is required to deposit and maintain monies belonging to others in a trust account, engages in advertising or promoting services as a broker in any manner, or has one or more other brokers affiliated with the sole proprietorship in the real estate business. And so this is kind of the backwards from the way I taught it, but that's what I taught you, right? If you are a sole proprietor and you want to do any of those things, you can't do it unless you have a broker in charge of your sole proprietorship. So it's not enough to just be a broker. So a full broker on active status can do real estate transactions as long as it doesn't involve any of those things. And once again, past people who know you are a broker and or, past people referring you stuff, you'd be fine. Now, folks, let me ask you a question. Let's see if we can piece this together. When I operated as a sole proprietor for 1.5 years as I did it, I could advertise, I could have trust accounts, and I could affiliate other brokers with me. Why do you think that might be?
Because you did the, I'm thinking because you did like the you worked with the broker in charge previously before your license. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Well, it wouldn't be enough to have previously been with one if I no longer had one supervising me.
You had more than 5 years experience in real estate.
Well, and understand that is a criteria of being a BIC. Let me help you out because y'all right on the cusp of it. I was a BIC. Folks, because I was a BIC, I could designate myself as the broker in charge of my sole proprietorship. Remember what we just read. A sole proprietorship needs to designate a BIC if they want to do any of these things. So I designated myself as my own broker in charge of my sole proprietorship. And so at that point, as a sole proprietorship, I could do everything that a firm could do. Enter into the thing I said before. As a sole proprietorship, because I am a BIC, and the BIC of my sole proprietorship, I could affiliate every single one of you under my sole proprietorship. Why? Because I'm a BIC. And that's all it takes to affiliate somebody is a broker in charge. Does that make sense? So if you're not able to be your own broker in charge and you do not have a broker in charge of your sole proprietorship, it's worthless. No advertising, no trust accounts, no affiliating other brokers. The only thing you can do is collect unsolicited referral fees and help unsolicited buyers. That's it.
Okay, so I just think I got confused. I thought I was on the right path, but now I feel like I'm confused. Okay, so if you are a big, you did your whatever requirements it is, your 2 years, whatever, you're a big. But if you get out of school, once you pass your test, you become a provisional. You have a provisional license, and you go and do the 90 hours, and you are a big, and you can't list, you can't sell, you can't advertise, you can't do any of those things. That's because you haven't created I'm confused.
Yeah, hold on, slow down. Slow down. You're putting the cart before the horse. I haven't officially told you what it takes to be a BIC. You just have to understand that a BIC is required. Okay, here, let's talk about this for a second, folks. In order to be a broker in charge or BIC eligible, here's the criteria. You have to have 2 years of full-time experience within the past 5 years. Okay? Full-time, meaning you've been practicing as a real estate broker on active status, and we'll get more about that in a second. So 2 years of full-time brokerage experience in the past 5 years. You have to be a full broker, and you have to be on active status. And if you meet all those criteria, it's paperwork. It's never automatic. You go to the real estate commission, and you file more paperwork that says, I want to be a broker in charge. And they will say, great, you have all these things. You say yes. And they will say, good, you're a broker in charge now. But there's one last piece in order to maintain that status. They will ultimately make you take a 12-hour broker in charge course as well. So folks, there is no magic BIC thing here. So understand, if you get your license on provisional status, you take all 3 post-licensing classes and become a full broker, you can activate your license. But you can only use it for unsolicited referral fees and unsolicited buyers. Well, if you have never been able to legally introduce yourself as a broker, should you have any business at all in that status? No. Which means if you go straight to full broker, straight to activating your license, you will never have experience, so you can never be a BIC. And you should never have business because that means you have illegally advertised. The only way that you could get legal business in that status is if you were active in a capacity that allowed you to advertise, meaning affiliated with a firm for a period of time, and then went to this status and people just remembered you were a broker. But the reason why I could operate is because I was a full broker and I was also a BIC. And so I designated as the BIC of my sole proprietorship, meaning all my business passed through me. And I was the broker in charge responsible for it, which allowed me to do all the things that a firm can do because a firm has to have a BIC under most circumstances. And so I could advertise, I could have a trust account, and I could affiliate other brokers. Why? Because I was a BIC. Does that make more sense now?
Yes, it makes more sense.
So you cannot become a BIC without experience.
Correct. It's impossible.
Don't be a BIC if you don't have experience.
Right. Not a good idea. Now, here's the thing, folks, just on a side note, they are having some very ample discussions on the BIC criteria right now. Nothing will change for your test or the immediate future because it's still in discussions, but it's very possible that next year they will change the criteria. I've been listening to a lot of the meetings at the commission level, but as it sits right now, it is 2 years of full-time brokerage experience in the past 5 years or 4 years of part-time brokerage experience in the past 5 years. Now, they don't define what the differentiation between full-time and part-time is. They basically say, ball's in your court. If you think it was full-time, tell us it was full-time. But if your license was inactive, it's never going to be considered full-time experience. That make sense?
I have a question.
What you got, Jamila?
Can you run back the 3 things you cannot do if you
are a full broker, sole proprietor without a BIC?
Yeah, so the no advertising, no trust. What was the third one?
No advertising or brokerage services in any way, shape, or form. no trust accounts, and no affiliating other brokers.
Okay.
Yep. There you go.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So that is the limited capacity that they keep referring. Now, folks, please understand, though, when you get a test question that says, can you activate your own license as a full broker and be a sole proprietorship, what is the answer? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. If the question is it super useful and a good idea? No. But can you do it? Yes. This is where you got to be careful on the test. That makes sense? So, let's talk about some timing pieces here with these licensing statuses, okay? I told you that our years run from July 1st to June 30th, okay? That's how they run, July 1st to June 30th. So you are all currently sitting in, as I mentioned before, the 2023-2024 licensing year. And as y'all pointed out, and y'all were completely correct in this respect, if you had your license issued sometime in June, you would be renewing your license already just mere weeks later, depending on the date. Leighton says, so the advertisements and listings seen on social media by full brokers is only allowed by employment by an entity. Don't use the word entity. The only thing that you have to be able to advertise is what?
A broker in charge.
Broker in charge. Entity means a firm, right? Sole proprietorship can advertise if it has a broker in charge. So if any advertisement you see, that just means somewhere there's a broker in charge. It's either a broker in charge of that sole proprietorship or broker in charge of an entity. Folks, if you go and you join Coldwell Banker HPW, let's just make sure you understand kind of the way that this works. Coldwell Banker HPW is a sister company to my school, okay? They have like 14 offices. Every single office has its own broker in charge. And so let me answer the other question that was in chat, because I think it was Bo that asked about how do you find a BIC to help you? Folks, every BIC wants to help you. You ready for this? If you get your license and you go talk to a firm and you've got gumption and you want to make money, they want to help you. You know why? Because when you make money, they make money. It is not hard to find a broker in charge, but sometimes it is depending on what your dedication is. If you say, I'm going to put in 2 hours a week, they don't want you. But if you say, I want to make $1 million this year, they say, come on, Slick, I'll help you. Because then they're going to get a cut of that pie. And so when you're dealing with a firm, you are going to join a firm that either has one office or multiple offices. Regardless, every office has to have its own broker in charge. So if you join Coldwell Banker HPW Cary office, your broker in charge, her name is Autumn. And she's a lovely person. She would be supervising you. Conversely, if you are somebody who is a BIC eligible broker, you could operate as a sole proprietor and be your own broker in charge. And at that point, the sole proprietor and the firm can do all the same things. The only differentiation is one has an entity and a firm license and the other does not. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. And can I ask you one more question?
Absolutely. Please do.
I was trying to write down the 3 things you said a full broker can't do, and I got no trust accounts and no advertisements, and what was the third?
No trust accounts, no advertisements, and no affiliating other brokers.
Awesome. Thank you.
You got it, for sure. Hey, folks, please ask questions. This crap's confusing. Let's just go ahead and call it what it is. Let's be honest, I'm probably speaking a different language for most of the night. And then as I repeat it and as I repeat it and as I repeat it, it's kind of like when you go to a Mexican restaurant and you learn, oh, queso means cheese? Yeah, no, they said it enough. I figured this out. Mas queso, por favor. It starts to make sense after a while, but when you first hear it, it's a different language. So it's going to get better, I promise. But please ask questions. I'm never going to yell at you. I'm not going to, poke you or prod you, okay? It's a learning experience. That's the whole point. So always ask questions. So let's keep going with this licensing thing here, folks. If you were to get your license issued at the end of June, you would be renewing June 30th, okay? Renewals is that currency keeps you current, failure to pay your expenses make you expired. So your license, you always want it to be on current and active status, okay? Current and active. Well, when you get it issued, that is called a license issuance. And then when you renew it every year, that is called a license renewal. Well, let me tell you why this is significant. You would get your license issued in June on current status, but then you would have to turn around and pay your renewal fee for it to then be current in the 2024-2025 licensing year that starts on July 1, which is why I said sometimes they don't issue licenses at the end of June. Let me tell you a reason why you may really consider getting your license issued in July. When we're dealing with education, you know already that you have to take 3 30-hour post-licensing courses within how long of your license issuance?
18 months.
18 months to move from provisional broker to full broker. You know that. We've taught you that. Here's the bad news. There is more education after that. It is called continuing education. It's CE. Anybody who has a license has to do CE. Most people who have any licenses have to do CE, continuing education. And so this is not triggered, this is important, until your second renewal year. In other words, you do not have to take CE until you have renewed your license one time. And when you are in your second renewal year, meaning leading up to your second renewal, you have to get your CE done prior to June 10th. So there's 2 different dates you need to know. June 10th is the deadline for your CE. June 30th is the deadline for your renewal fee. So let me put this in perspective for you. If you get your license issued on June 1st, you will have to pay your renewal fee on June 30th. Furthermore, that means in July, you will be in your second renewal year now, and you all will have to get your CE done prior to June 10th of 2025. However, if your license is issued on July 1, that means it is issued at the very beginning of the 2024-2025 licensing year, which means that June 30th of 2025 will be you renewing your license for the first time, which means you will not have to take CE until when?
The next renewal.
June 2026.
June 10th of 2026. That's a long time away, folks. You see the difference that makes. The way that the laws are written is once you have renewed your license the first time, you now have to take CE in this next year. So you could see it tested as after your first renewal or in your second renewal year. Whichever. Still true. And so it is comprised of 8 hours of continuing education. It is 4 hours of update and 4 hours of elective. And you have to get them both prior to June 10th. Folks, they do not teach CE after June 10th and up to June 30th. It's a blackout period. You can't take it.
I have a question. So like I have a pharmacy license, so I have to do CEs for my license, and it's like 20 hours. And some are in person, and some I can just do independent self-study CE and take a test. Is that kind of how it works for this too?
Yeah. With your update class, it has to be at least synchronous, which is what we're doing right now, right? It has to be live. Electives can be done at your own pace.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So, education is typically the differentiation between active and inactive. And money, currency, is the differentiation between current and expired. Remember, currency keeps you current. Failure to pay expenses makes you expired. The only exception to that is as a provisional broker, because your license starts out as inactive, and the only way for a provisional broker to activate their license is what?
Little big.
Affiliate with a BIC. That's it.
Big.
There you go. So let me paint a couple scenarios for you to help you understand this, okay? If you don't pay your dues by June 30th, on July 1st, you will be expired. And they punish you for going expired, and they punish you for going inactive. Let's talk about the punishment for going expired. It is now automatically $90. They double it. Instead of $45, you owe them $90. And it's not automatic. Once you pay them the money, you would have to reactivate and reaffiliate after answering a couple questions. Folks, if you go expired for greater than 6 months, it's $90. And then there's an even more of a punishment. You have to do a new background check. You also have to take the real estate licensing exam again, or elect to take a post-licensing in lieu of the licensing exam as a punishment and do a reinstatement application.
Is that only if you're a provisional broker or even if you're a regular broker?
Even if you're a full broker.
Oh.
That's a little extreme. Yeah.
You ready for this? If you let your license be expired for more than 2 years, you're back in this class. The point is, folks, pay that $45 every freaking year by June 30th. Otherwise, they punish you. So let's go to the other side now. If you do not get your update and your elective done, folks, it's 4 hours and 4 hours for a total of 8. So let's say that you missed taking both. There is nothing you can do after June 10th to fix this, but your license does stay active through the rest of the year. So it will stay active until June 30th, but there is nothing you can do once you've missed that to stop from going inactive on July 1. So now your license is inactive on July 1. Well, guess what? There's punishments. You missed 8 hours of education, 4 hours of update, 4 hours of elective. Here's what the commission says. Because you can't be trusted to take your classes on time, now that we're in a new licensing year, go ahead and take your update and your elective for the new licensing year and take 2 4-hour electives to make up for the 8 hours you missed from the previous year for a total of 16 hours before you can reactivate your license. After that, you can reactivate your license. So active versus inactive typically involves education. Current versus expired deals with the money. And the only exception to that is, of course, PBs, who always start out as inactive and have to have a broker in charge. Same thing too, if you don't get post-licensing done within the 18 months, even if you were affiliated inactive, because of that education deficiency is what we call it, you would go inactive. How are we feeling? So the only status that you can do real estate brokerage activity on is current and active. Now I told you, okay, when you don't pay your money and you go expired, even if you did all your education, we just call you expired. That is the only way to talk. You can never be expired and active. Does that make sense? Expired is so powerful that that's all you are. You don't pay your dues. Doesn't matter if you're good on education. Doesn't matter anything else. We just call you expired. Conversely, if you pay your money, you're considered current. And then if you don't do your education but paid your money, you would be current and inactive. Still can't use your license, but you can be current and inactive. You can be current and active. That's the one you can play real estate on. Or you could just be expired. Folks, there are test questions on this, which is why I'm introducing this early to let it solidify in your mind. Because I will give you test questions that say, Tommy didn't pay his dues, but he took his CE. What is the appropriate status of his license on July 1st? You gotta be able to tell me.
Expired.
Yeah, if they don't pay your dues and take a CE, that's exactly right. Expired. Take 5,000 extra classes, doesn't matter. You're still expired if you don't pay your dues. That's right.
So pretty much just pay your dues and you'll stay current but inactive regardless.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So Leighton, understand this. Folks, in the real world, you can always fix education. So let's say that you pay your dues every year, but you're not taking your CE. Well, eventually when you want to activate your license, they're going to make you take a crap ton of classes, but it can be fixed and you still have a license. But if you go expired, they take your license away, and now there's the class, this one again, there's the test. So really and truthfully, the best thing to do, even if you're not using your license, keep it current and active so you can collect referral fees is the best thing to do. Because folks, CE costs about $60 a pop. So we're talking $120 for your CE a year, plus $45. Pay it every year to keep your license. So that way you don't ever have to use it or lose it. But yeah, you can always fix education. So pay the money at the very least every year.
Hey, how do you pay this again? Like through where?
You pay this at the North Carolina Real Estate Commission's website.
Okay.
Yeah, whenever you get your license, there's a login portal, and you just go in there and you just click pay dues.
And so CE is every 2 years, or it only starts after 2 years and then is every year after that 2 years?
It starts in your second renewal year. So understand that it's not just blanketed 2 years, because think about it, Leighton. If you get your license on June 1st of this year, you will start CE next year because you will have already renewed once. So that's the trigger. You've renewed once, and now it's every year until the day you die.
Okay.
Yeah. By the way, folks, I'm going to tell you something right now. Okay, you ready for this? Somebody probably didn't tell you this, but I'm going to be the one to tell you this. Did you know that when you get your license and become a real estate agent, you don't ever get to retire? Okay, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. You just don't get to. I found this out the hard way. Let me tell you how I found this out. I was a brand new broker in my mid-20s, and I affiliated with a firm. And the average age of licensees in that firm was like 162, okay? So I walked in there as a brand new agent at my first sales meeting, and bless their hearts, there was just a room full of silver, and there was one lady who came in with a walker at a 90-degree angle, all right? So the sweetest lady you'll ever meet in your life, and I'm sitting there as like 25 or something. I'm just looking around, I'm like, we don't retire, we just have to die one day? Like are you forcing them to be here, or you rented them from the nursing home? What's going on here, right? And so then I figured out you don't get to retire. You just have to die one day, right? That's just what happens. We don't get to retire from real estate. Yep. Say what?
Or get sued.
Or get sued. Yeah, I mean, that could happen too, but hopefully not do that. You know what else it's like, folks? Y'all remember that movie, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or Willy Wonka, the old school one, like the blonde kid, not all the millions of remakes? I like to equate it to Grandpa Joe, right? That deadbeat was laying in the bed for 20 years. Now all of a sudden this chocolate golden ticket, he just pops up like a spring chicken and goes in. I just imagine the real estate agents are just lying on their deathbed, right? In hospice. And their grandkids are there. It's like, Grandpa, you just got a text message. Something about buying a house. They're probably ripping cords out. I got one more in me. I got one more in me. And they're just walking it off and just going to, I don't know. I don't think you get to retire, folks. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. You just have to die one day as a real estate agent. So keep that in mind.
At least you could die with like a lot of rentals.
There you go. Yeah, with lots of money. But you know what they say, Alex, you can't take it with you. So
yeah, you can't take it with you. At least you could die. At least you could live a good life.
Well, and you can leave something to your kids and other people, right? That's right.
Yeah, they'll be like, Daddy made something for us.
Yeah, that's right. And then there's that inheritance tax benefit where they don't have to pay taxes on it if they inherit it. So there's lots of tax perks there. So
exactly.
Yeah, there you go.
Solar panels on all your properties as well.
Say it again.
So put solar panels on all your properties so that you can get bigger tax.
Oh, so the tax credits from them. Yeah, there you go. Leighton says we must do our first renewal by June 30th. Now here's the deal. For y'all, it's going to be very weird. Okay. You will probably, if I had to guess, based on the date this class ends, based on the date that you would end up testing, and based on the time for the Real Estate Commission to process it, I would wager that every single one of you will probably end up getting your licenses issued on July 1. Because if it's after like June 10th, I don't think they're issuing them until the new year, unless you call and beg for it. Which means that none of you will have to take CE on June 10th of 2025. You will be able to go until 2026. Now, don't quote me on that, but that's just my guess, that they probably will not issue your licenses till July 1. And I've got friends I'll call them and ask them at the commission before you get to that point in your class. So everybody kind of following along with this flow of events here, current versus active, some of these status conversations.
Yeah, sorry if I'm getting off track. Can you just remind me one more time why it would be until 2026?
Yeah, because your test date is June 5th, right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So realistically, let's say that every single one of you passes your test on June 5th. It takes us a couple days to report it to the commission that you passed, which means that you realistically probably will not be able to take your test until June 7th. Best case scenario, probably June 8th or 9th. And then I think the commission, the way they look at it is if it's after June 10th, they just hold off issuing it because they don't want you to have to pay the renewal fee twice. And so they will basically send you a notice, hey, we got your stuff, but we will not issue your license until July 1. And it used to be when I got my license, they offered me that, and I said, no, I want it now. I want to start now. And of course, had to turn around and pay the dues. So I don't know if they're still giving you an option, which is why I said I've got friends at the commission. I'll call them and ask them on your specific scenario, just so I can give you a little insight before you get to that point in your class. But that's why, because your license most likely will not be issued until July 1 because of the way that they do things over there.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Which is not a bad problem to have. You just give yourself an extra year to take some classes, right? That's not bad. Post-licensing is still 18 months, but, you know.
Technically, our first renewal will be of 2025.
Yeah, if your licenses, as I'm assuming they are, get issued on July 1st of 2024 this year, then your renewal will be June 30th of 2025. That'll be your first renewal, and that just means that you will all have to get your CE done by June 10th of 2026, because that'll be your second renewal year.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep, you got it. So here's just a couple more notes here, okay? When I say licenses, folks, I mean all of them get renewed. Firm licenses, brokers licenses, LNCLs, which is that limited non-resident commercial license. And so understand that there are times where somebody, as a broker, has a broker's license, but then they have created an entity and got a firm license for that entity. So let me help you out here. If I am a broker with an entity and a firm license, how much do you think I am paying every year at renewal time?
$90.
$90. $45 for each license. That's it. Now the statutory period on here, you can pay as early as May 15th for that $45. You cannot pay before that, right? It would be nice to just cut them a check for $1,000 so I don't have to worry about it for the next couple years, but they don't let us do that. So it has to be paid every year between May 15th and June 30th. And I told you there are punishments, like it being double, if you do not get it done in an appropriate period of time. And there's just an expansion of what I've already told you. $45 every year by the end of June 30th in order to keep your license current. If they do not get that money, your license is expired. And remember, I told you expired is a standalone status. If you don't pay your dues, doesn't matter if you're going on education or not, you are still considered just expired. So many of you, sometimes I just have to like scroll through to see your faces, right? Because I can't see all of you at once. And I'm like, is this screen glazed over? No? Okay, how about these people? I gotta like scroll through to like gauge your faces, right? Are they alive? Are they okay? Is that a cardboard cutout of Olivia back there? I'm just kidding. I see it's Olivia. So the way to remember that, as I keep saying, currency keeps you current. Failure to pay expenses makes you expired. Folks, the way to think about it too, it's like a parking meter, not the new age digital ones with the apps on our phones. Folks, them old school parking meters, you remember those? You put the quarters in there. Some of y'all too young to remember this. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. You put the quarters in there and then you turn it and it'll say, you know, good or, you know, current or whatever. And what would happen is when your time ran out, this big old red bar would come across the screen and it would say expired. So just like the parking meters, that's exactly what happens to your license. As long as the money's in there and your time is a full year, right? But when that time runs out, you're expired unless you put more money in there. Just like that. Somebody got a question? Go ahead.
Just for clarification, expired license equals no license can never be active. You can never.
Correct. Expired is a standalone status. And so it does not matter how good you are in education. If you don't pay your dues, you are just considered expired, and it's the same as having no license at all. So that is very testable.
And to get reinstated?
There is paperwork. You got to pay that $90, and then you got to answer some questions and get it reactivated, reinstated. Yep. Now, remember, the paperwork gets worse the longer you go. It's really like 2 questions. If it's like 1 day expired, it's $90, 2 questions, and then you got to reactivate because it's never automatic. There's a form. It's called 2.08 on the commission's website. So let's say you're affiliated with a firm. Your broker in charge would have to resubmit form 2.08 to reaffiliate you with their firm and reactivate you with their firm. That's what they would have to do to do it. If it's over 6 months, that's when background check, full reinstatement application, another taking the state licensing exam or post-licensing as punishment, all that fun-filled jazz. Yeah. So this is where I already told you, okay, how do you fix expired? Anytime from 1 day up to 6 months, $90, and what I just said to Rob, okay? If it's been longer than 6 months, $90, reinstatement application, new background check, taking the state licensing exam, anything longer than 2 years and you are back in pre-licensing. Now, they're not going to test you on it, but here's an interesting note. If you are a full broker and you're expired for 2 years but less than 3, you do have to take pre-licensing. You do have to take the exam. You do have to do a new background check. You do have to do a new application. But if you are a full broker and it's been more than 2 and less than 3 years, you'll be reinstated as a full broker. You don't have to take post again. However, if you are a full broker and it's been longer than 3 years, it's the whole shebang over again. You're reinstated as a PB and have to go through all of that again. Jamil says, when in this process do we start looking for a BIC once we're licensed? Yeah, it's a good idea to wait until you actually get your license, and I'll tell you why. There are a lot of people who go and they go and talk to a firm and they say, oh yeah, once you pass, we'll definitely bring you on. And then they don't pass. And then they're going to be like, hey, how'd you do on your exam? And then they're going to have that that weirdness, right? You're like, yeah, I'm just waiting on the results any day now, anytime. It's I'll keep you posted. I'm waiting. So it's probably not a good idea, as they say, to count your chickens before the eggs hatch. I'll tell you this, folks, there are plenty of people within Coldwell Banker HPW who will probably reach out to you. Full disclosure, because they would love to talk to you. We have a big school. We have a sister relationship with that company, and they are a great firm. And so definitely give them the time of day and talk to them. Folks, I'll tell you this right now. I took my licensing class, as I told you yesterday, with this school. And in less than a year, about a year and a half, I was managing my own firm. Now, I wasn't a BIC because I couldn't be a BIC yet legally. But in 1 year and a half, I knew enough about the business and I was doing enough. I was managing my own firm. And so it's sometimes good to join a big company with a lot of training and a lot of resources because it can expedite your career substantially, as opposed to some of the smaller firms where they don't really give you the time of day. And we'll talk more about the pros and cons to firms. There's training, there's splits, there's all kinds of different things to consider. But there will be, now that you're taking this class and once you get your license, there will be 10,000 firms reaching out to you saying, come talk to us, we want to talk to you. Sorry in advance, but you're fresh meat, right? They want to talk to you. That's what they do.
I have a question.
What you got?
So once we take the state test, we don't find out right then if we pass or not?
The state test?
I meant the exam for the real estate exam. Once we pass the class and we register to take the class with the real estate commission, do we find out right then that we pass, or we have to wait? Okay.
When you take the state licensing exam, they will give you both portions in the same setting, just a sitting like I'm going to do, and you will walk out of a proctored classroom and they will hand you a sheet of paper and it'll say pass or it'll say fail. Or actually, it's 2 sheets of paper, one for national, one for state. So it'll say pass, pass, fail, fail, pass, fail. Either way, it's a fail if you don't pass both. So, but yeah, you'll know right then and there. So, as I've been saying, active is the only status that you can do anything on. I think y'all are kind of getting a good feeling for this now. How do you remain active? Pay your dues every year. Take your education every year. Because if you don't pay, you're expired, which means you can't be active. And if you fail in your education, you go inactive. So, I think you get it, right? I think you got it now. Okay, everybody feeling okay? Leighton says, how did you manage your own firm without being a BIC? How did you market and advertise? Because it's a good question. The firm that I managed had a BIC. He didn't want me to be the BIC. He just wanted me to run the show. So I was affiliated under a broker in charge, but I was running the show for the entire firm. That's how.
Cool deal. Thank you.
Yeah. So it was actually really cool. He was a developer, and he was looking for a sales manager for new construction. So he had his own building company and his own new construction company. And so I basically ran the operations. And so legally, he was responsible for the entire firm on paper. But the day-to-day handling and advice and looking after all the stuff, that was my job. And then, of course, when I became eligible, I set myself as BIC eligible, which put me in a secondary position if anything ever happened to him, but he still wanted to maintain it as himself. So there are plenty of things that you can do. Folks, let me help you out here, okay? Because y'all are asking really good questions. I am going to paint a picture for you, and then I'm going to see if you can answer this for me. When you become a full broker, can you activate your own license and operate independently as a sole proprietor in North Carolina? This is not a trick question. Can you activate your own license?
Yeah.
Yes. But what can't you do?
Advertise, list,
Trust.
Account, no advertising.
There you go. Y'all nailed it. No trust accounts, no advertising, and no affiliating other brokers. What would it take for you to be able to do those things as a sole proprietorship?
Work under a BIC.
Have a BIC.
Is be under a BIC.
Let's go with the have a BIC. Well, folks, think about this. You can be a sole proprietorship as a full broker, and you can be a full broker very fast, but you're not able to be your own BIC. Who said it had to be you? What is stopping you, folks, who have the highest aspirations of running the show, from becoming a sole proprietorship and hiring some schmuck like me who's already able to be a BIC to be your BIC and having your own firm? What's stopping you? Well, let's not say firm, but from having your own sole proprietorship that can do everything a firm can do. What is stopping you?
Years of experience.
No. You can hire somebody else to be the BIC. You have to have a BIC. It doesn't have to be you. So you could be, huh?
That's the way around it.
Well, that's the way that it works. The law states that you have to have a BIC of something that wants to advertise, whether it be a sole proprietorship or a firm. Well, if you want to run a sole proprietorship or a firm and you aren't able to be the BIC, all you got to do is hire one. If you pay some schmuck a salary who's BIC or BIC eligible, they'll come do it for you. Nothing is stopping you as long as you're willing to pay a salary for a BIC. That make sense? It just can't be you yet. Fabiola says, what is the difference between BIC eligible and BIC? Excellent question. Let me answer that. The only difference is when you are sitting as BIC eligible, you are sitting at the ready to oversee somebody. I like to call it actively BICing. When you are sitting as BIC, you are actually overseeing somebody. So right now, I'm affiliated with a firm. So I am sitting as BIC eligible. I'm not overseeing myself. I'm under another BIC. But if I ever wanted to go back to a sole proprietorship, I would designate myself as my own BIC again. See the difference? A BIC means you are actively supervising someone or multiple people. BIC eligible means you're sitting at the ready and at the drop of a hat, you can do it. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. So we can go back and forth, right? I was a BIC for a while. Now I'm back to BIC eligible. I was BIC for a while, back to BIC eligible. Because if I don't need to be the BIC of myself because I have one, that just means I'm not supervising myself. I look at somebody else and I'm like, I'm your problem now. Sometimes I'm my own problem. Sometimes I'm somebody else's problem. This is the way it works. Another good question. This is what I love about this. The wheels are starting to turn here. Can a BIC be a BIC to multiple PB or brokers? Is there a limit to how many people? Yes, they can be the BIC to multiple people. No, there is currently no limit. So there are some BICs with 10,000 licensees underneath them. There are some BICs with 2 licensees underneath them. There are some people who are only BIC of themselves. There are some people who don't take on PBs. There are other people who take on 10,000 PBs. There's no rules in regard to that. Now, the rule is you can only be the BIC of one office at a time. So like I can't be the BIC of the Cary office and the Durham office. That would not be allowed. So you can only be BIC of one location or one sole proprietorship. For the sake of this class, that's all I need to know. Yeah. There was a caveat to that, but I'm not going to tell you that because it's not going to be testable. But yeah. What you got, Alex? You look like you had a question.
Nah, I say no.
No worries.
I have a question. So if you was a BIC and you could take on all of us, if we were in the same office.
Yeah. When you all get your licenses as provisional brokers on inactive status, if I was a BIC and the BIC of my sole proprietorship, I could affiliate every single one of you simultaneously and have 39 licensees underneath me at one time. Sure could. 39 provisional brokers at that. Even if I taught you, there's no rule stopping me. I could be like, listen, I taught you, I'm your teacher, you're all going to work for me. Do it, right? I could try to coerce. Now, I can't force you to. But if I tried to talk you all into doing it, I could absolutely affiliate all of you. Now, listen, I don't manage firms anymore. I like this side of the table where I get to teach all this stuff, but you're somebody else's problem, okay? You go out and you be somebody else's problem. Listen, I'm enough trouble keeping track of myself, all right? So y'all can go on. But yeah, in theory, right? Now, here's what, go ahead.
Quick question. You being BIC eligible, can you have your own sole proprietorship or your own, or do you have to be a BIC or hire a BIC? Or can you yourself have a sole proprietorship being BIC eligible?
So if I'm understanding your question right, let me paint a picture and see if this answers it. If I wanted to operate as a sole proprietorship with just my broker's license and I left myself as just BIC eligible, I can't advertise, I can't have trust accounts, and I can't affiliate other brokers. Because that means that I'm sitting in a capacity where I'm not supervising anything. But all it takes, though, is for me to fill out a piece of paperwork that says, now I'm, instead of being BIC eligible, I am BIC of my own sole proprietorship, which means I've turned the switch on. Now I can do all those things. That's all it takes, is just telling the commission, yes, I'm going to be the BIC of myself, or no, I am not.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let me give you an example of this, just because I don't want to start any new topics yet, because we are about to be in that scenario where you can just talk to me for the last 10 minutes after I go over these things. Now, this is going to look a little bit weird, and hopefully it doesn't confuse you more, but I will show you this. So here's the weird thing, folks. Remember how I said that I was the BIC of myself for a while as a sole proprietor? But then I said I'm actually affiliated with a firm now. You remember me saying that, yeah? Well, technically speaking, when I got affiliated with a firm, I never canceled my affiliation with my sole proprietorship. So here's my record right now on the screen. My primary firm is actually still listed as my sole proprietorship. And I am BIC eligible. But I'm not overseeing myself. So as such, I shouldn't be doing anything with my sole proprietorship. But I'm also affiliated with Coldwell Banker HPW under Glenn Weeks and the Holly Springs office. So I'm doing things under his supervision, and because I'm a full broker, I can have dual affiliations. That's what it looks like, as long as it's fine. But right now, I can't do anything under my sole proprietorship. So even though it exists, I can't do anything under it. Really and truthfully, what I need to do is go in here and fill out some paperwork and say, I'm not doing anything under my sole proprietorship anymore. But my sole proprietorship operated under my broker's license. This firm operates under a firm license. Difference between entity and sole proprietorship. Hopefully that helped didn't anymore. So let me wrap up this thing and just let you ask questions. And of course, after you have a night to mull on it, we'll kind of provide some more clarity. But we're also going to switch gears because this is the end of these slides. Because I am sitting as a BIC eligible broker, if you are a BIC or BIC eligible status, your update course is called BIC Up. If you are a full broker or a provisional broker who needs to take an update, it's called Gen Up. The electives are universal. There's over 450 approved electives. Take one before June 10th. But the update is very specific on your current status, okay? So provisional brokers and full brokers take Gen Up. BIC and BIC eligible brokers take BIC Up. Each have to take 8 hours by June 10th to stay active for being up to date on your education after your first renewal year, or in other words, in your second license renewal year. Oops, bam, there you go. So here's just some of the terms we talked about. And that wraps up your kind of intro to your licensing and statuses section. So provisional broker is the equivalent of a salesperson on the national exam, right? But PB you will see on the state portion. They cannot operate independently. They have to affiliate with a broker in charge to activate their license. They also have to get post-licensing done within 18 months. So to move from provisional broker to full broker, those 3 30-hour post-licensing classes within 18 months. Then you're a broker, also called a full broker, also called a non-provisional broker. They can operate independently, but in a very limited capacity. They cannot advertise. They cannot have a trust account. They cannot affiliate with other brokers if they are sole proprietor, non-BIC. Broker in charge is somebody who has 2 years of full-time experience in the past 5 years or 4 years of part-time experience in the past 5 years. Full broker on active status, and they will ultimately have to take a 12-hour broker in charge course once they designate. Now, I'll go ahead and give you some time frames here, folks. That 12-hour broker in charge course can be taken up to a year in advance of designating as BIC or BIC eligible. But you can actually designate as BIC or BIC eligible before you take the course. And if you do that, you would have to take this course within 120 days of designating as BIC or BIC eligible. And there will be slides for this later. I'm just kind of giving you some insight into it. A firm is a licensed entity, right? Something created with the Secretary of State. An LLC, a corporation, a partnership. LNCL is a limited non-resident commercial license. LL Beans is those brokerage activities: list, lease, buy, exchange, auction, negotiate, sell. And if it deals with real property for others for compensation, a license is required in North Carolina. Active versus inactive typically has to deal with education. Current versus expired has to deal with your currency or your renewal fees. Sole proprietorship is somebody operating their business through themselves with a broker's license, no entity created. Doesn't necessarily mean one person though. And then an entity is, as I said, something created with the Secretary of State. Huzzah. Folks, we got 6 minutes left. What do you want to talk about?
Hey, is class finished yet?
No, it's ending at 9:40. Henceforth, why I said we got 6 minutes left. Come on, Alex, stay with it. I know you're eager to get the hell out of here, but, you know, come on now. Say what?
I got hella shit I gotta do. I ain't gonna lie.
So somebody with the big license does not need to take the Gen Up continue education?
No, you would take BIC Up instead of Gen Up. Now, here's the thing, Bo. They're basically identical courses. The BIC Up just has like an extra 40 minutes worth of material that is unique to BICs. But it's very specific on which one you have to take. So you cannot take Gen Up. If you take Gen Up as a BIC or BIC eligible, you will not get credit. It's got to be a BIC Up class.
Got you.
And don't confuse that with a 12-hour broker in charge course. That's a different class.
Got you.
Yeah.
When is that first test?
When is your first test? In this class? Every night. On your own time. We're not taking any in class. I got too much to cover. But that's why they're all built into the material, so you can quiz yourself after we go over them. I would suggest taking your first midterm around chapter 10. And then the practice final probably like 3 days before the last day of class. You don't want to wait till the very end. But of course, we'll be learning almost up to the very end. But yeah, you start working in that online program immediately. On a side note, folks, those of you who asked me to reset your stuff, I went in there and I swear I knew where it was, but I'm going to have to contact customer support for that website because I couldn't find it. Sorry, I'll work on it. See if I can find it. Worst case scenario, just go in and redo it. It's not the end of the world, but there's got to be a way to do it. I'll find it. What else y'all want to talk about?
So I have a question. So with the geez, I like my brain.
Me too. Happens all the time.
So with the classes, like the education classes and the electives, is, you probably already said it, but I'm not sure. But is there a way that it basically records like a website or something that you go to when it's time for you to take those courses and stuff, or sign up for the courses that you're wanting to do or whatnot with the electives and the?
Oh yeah. So you just, it's basically identical to signing up for this class, folks. Like my school, like for my students who would take CE, they just go to my website, they enroll in it, we send them a link, they show up. And once they get done, we as a school report it to the commission. We say, Celicia showed up, she took her 4-hour elective, and the commission gets a record of that. And so then they know that you've taken your elective for the year, and then we report it when you take your gen up. So there's nothing you need to do manually except for sign up for the class and show up, and then I report it to the commission.
Okay.
Yeah, good question.
Are there tips to studying this material?
Yeah, the tip is, of course, to kind of, my biggest recommendation, folks, follow along the pre-licensing syllabus, the 2023 pre-licensing syllabus in the online materials, because that's how the class is going to flow from here on out identically. And so I would look in the next couple topics and kind of then read about those topics in the books before we have class. So tomorrow night we'll get into basic real estate concepts. I would read into some of the basic real estate concept chapter, and some of the things that flow from there. And then that way you've seen some of, you've been exposed to it. So then when I start talking about it, it makes more sense in your brains and you can ask better questions. And that leads to better retention. And then I would take the quizzes after we finish that topic. So Unit 1 quiz I would take after we finish Unit 1 tomorrow. There's no quiz to take yet because this is kind of a unique section. There really is, we did it early and this is part of the license laws and commission rules. But that's my recommendation. Always study off of that syllabus, because if you go through the sections and you're like, oh, I don't know this, make sure you ask me questions about it. Make sure you go read about it, because if it's in the syllabus, it can be on the test. On a side note too, Day 10 just finished uploading on the YouTube channel as I'm sitting here. So you've got the first 10 days of class at your fingertips already. We're only on day 2. It means you got a lot of material that you can go ahead and start looking ahead on if you wanted to. What you got, Constantine?
So in your own opinion, is North Carolina the hardest state to pass your state exam on?
Here's a funny story, and then I'll let you out of here. I would historically have told you so, but as a cocky instructor, I actually Googled one time the hardest state to get a license in. It's apparently Colorado. Colorado has over 200 hours of pre-licensing class, and the test is very difficult. Here's the funny part of this. Because I'm licensed in North Carolina, they let me take the exam in Colorado without ever taking a class. So I have a Colorado license because I'm cocky, and I'm like, I want to see if I can pass this test without taking anything. I passed the national with flying colors, and I basically passed their state by 2 questions. If I had missed 2 more, I would have failed it because, as I said, the laws and rules are so different. So I would say Colorado is probably first. North Carolina is probably second if I had to guess. Although the good news is it seems like it's easier, I'll use the term loosely, with the new test change. A lot of people seem to be doing very well with the new test change. So yay us. So.
Thank God you guys can avoid the 200 hours of class time. I've kind of lost my sanity.
Yeah, I've never been to Colorado, but now I have a license there because I'm cocky and I like to take tests. I don't know.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. Folks, thank y'all for being amazing.